Picture for a moment the year 1520. In the great Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan, the air, thick with smoke, carries the scent of burning knowledge. A Spanish friar, his face set in grim determination, feeds a vibrant, painted book into the flames. To him, it is a work of the devil, a thing to be erased from the earth. In that single, destructive act, centuries of history, science, and belief seem to vanish into the fire. We are often told that this was the end, that the brilliant, complex world of the Aztecs was silenced forever, its secrets turned to ash. But that is not the whole story, because some of those books known as codices survived, hidden away, smuggled to safety, or simply overlooked. They waited. And within their beautiful, bewildering pages, they held secrets, not just stories, but encrypted messages from a lost world, waiting for the right moment to be decoded. These are not books as we know them. Aztec codices are masterpieces of pictographic writing, a language of images where a single glyph can tell an entire story. A footprint signifies a journey, a temple glyph reveals a sacred rite, a rabbit depicted next to a polk vessel tells of intoxication and divine celebration. They are at once breathtakingly beautiful and incredibly complex, a visual code that for centuries after the conquest remained largely unbroken. For a long time, scholars saw them as simple records of kings and calendars. But we now understand they are far more. They are intricate maps of the cosmos, detailed records of advanced botanical knowledge, and profound philosophical texts that challenge everything we thought we knew about this civilization. They are a treasure map, and we are finally learning how to read it. So today we embark on a kind of intellectual adventure, a treasure hunt across the centuries. We are going to unlock 30 of the most incredible secrets hidden within these ancient codices, secrets that are actively rewriting our understanding of the Aztec Empire. We will journey from their epic creation myths, where gods sacrificed themselves to create the sun, to their startlingly accurate astronomical observations. We will uncover their sophisticated medical practices, their profound understanding of ecology, and the hidden meanings behind their most fearsome rituals. This is not a dry history lesson. This is a rediscovery of a world we thought was lost. It is a story of resilience coded in deerskin and amate paper, and it promises to change the way you see one of history's most fascinating civilizations. So, let's begin our journey into the heart of the Codex and listen to the whispers of a world that refused to be silenced. Our first secret takes us to the heart of Mexico City's National Museum of Anthropology, where a colossal, intricately carved stone disc weighing 24 tons captures the gaze of every visitor. For generations, this iconic monument has been popularly known as the Aztec calendar stone, a name that suggests its primary function was tracking the days and months. But this label is a profound oversimplification. The so-called calendar stone is in reality far more ambitious. It is nothing less than a grand, stone-bound encyclopedia of the Aztec cosmos, a complete narrative of creation, destruction, and the precarious nature of existence itself. It was not a practical tool for farmers or merchants. It was a sacred object, a focal point for the most profound theological and philosophical understandings of the Aztec world, likely intended for the eyes of high priests and scholars alone. At the very center of this massive sculpture, we find the key to its meaning, the face of Tenochtitlan, the fifth sun god. His tongue is a sacrificial flint knife, a stark and powerful image that speaks directly to the core Aztec belief that the sun required constant nourishment, the sacred energy of human blood, to continue its daily journey across the sky and stave off a perpetual darkness. This is not a benevolent, life-giving sun in the modern sense. It is a deity locked in a desperate struggle for survival, a struggle that demanded the ultimate price from humanity. Surrounding Tenochtitlan are 4 square panels, each containing a symbolic glyph. These are not mere decorations. They represent the 4 previous worlds or suns that existed before our own. According to the myth, each of these eras was ruled by a different god and ended in a cataclysmic destruction by jaguars, wind, fiery rain, and a great flood. The current era, the fifth sun, was believed to be destined for its own end through devastating earthquakes. The stone, therefore, serves as a permanent reminder of the cyclical nature of time and the ever-present threat of cosmic collapse. Radiating out from this central drama are a series of concentric rings packed with symbolic meaning. One ring contains the 20 glyphs representing the days of the Aztec month. Each day, like crocodile or wind or house, was more than just a name. It carried its own spiritual significance and influence over human affairs. Beyond this, we find symbols for the cardinal directions, each associated with a specific color and god, anchoring the cosmic narrative in the physical world. And encircling the entire stone are two great fire serpents, Zucotl, whose meeting faces at the bottom create a date glyph that scholars believe might commemorate the birth of the fifth sun in the year 13 Reed. Every element is interconnected, forming a complex visual language that encodes history, prophecy, and divine law. This was not an object for public timekeeping, but a concentrated representation of the universe, used by the intellectual elite to contemplate the deepest questions of life, death, and humanity's fragile place within the cosmic order. It is a map of reality as the Aztecs understood it, a masterpiece of theological thought carved in stone. While the calendar stone revealed a cosmic philosophy, another codex unveiled a secret of a far more earthly, yet equally profound, nature, a mastery of medicine that would have been unimaginable to the European conquerors. This brings us to our second secret, found not on a grand stone monument but within the delicate, painted pages of a book known as the Badianus Manuscript. Created in 1552, just 30 years after the fall of Tenochtitlan, this document is a breathtaking anomaly. It is the first herbal manuscript written in the Americas, a comprehensive encyclopedia of Aztec medicinal plants compiled by two indigenous men, a Nahua physician named Martin de la Cruz and a Latin-speaking translator, Juan Badiano, whose name the manuscript now bears. It was crafted not for the Aztec elite, but as a gift for the Spanish king, perhaps in a desperate attempt to demonstrate the sophistication and value of the knowledge the Europeans were so eagerly destroying. The Codex itself is a visual masterpiece of botanical illustration. Each of its stunning pages is dedicated to specific plants, rendered with a scientific precision that allows for clear identification even today. We see the vibrant red flowers of the Cacaloxychitl tree, the distinct leaves of the Yortley plant, and the intricate root systems of various herbs. But these are not just pretty pictures, they form a meticulous, systematic guide. The Aztecs had developed a sophisticated system of classifying plants based on their medicinal properties, understanding their effects on the human body with remarkable accuracy. The illustrations serve as a direct link between the image and the plant's practical application, a visual pharmacopoeia designed for expert use. This systematic approach to cataloging nature reveals a scientific mindset that was far ahead of its time, challenging the colonial assumption of indigenous ignorance. Within these beautiful pages lie the true secrets, complex recipes for salves, poultices, and potions that address a vast range of ailments. The Codex provides remedies for fevers, wounds, and digestive issues, but it goes much further, detailing treatments for more serious conditions like gout and even what appears to be angina. One remarkable entry describes a treatment for a condition termed fearful heart, which modern researchers interpret as severe anxiety or cardiac pain, using a mixture of plants known to have calming or circulatory effects. The depth of pharmacological knowledge is staggering. They understood the need for precise dosages, the importance of combining ingredients to enhance efficacy or counteract side effects, and even the concept of using specific plants as binding agents to create pill-like preparations. They utilized plants with diuretic, analgesic, and anti-inflammatory properties, many of which have been confirmed by contemporary science. What makes this codex so revolutionary is how it showcases a medical system that often paralleled, and in some cases, surpassed European medicine of the same era. While European physicians were still heavily reliant on practices like bloodletting based on the theory of humors, Aztec doctors were employing a vast and effective natural pharmacy. They had a profound understanding of wound care, using plants with antiseptic properties to prevent infection. They developed treatments for skin conditions and eye infections that were likely far more effective than anything available in 16th century Europe. The Badianus Manuscript stands as a powerful, encrypted testament to this lost world of healing, a secret that remained hidden for centuries, proving that the conquest, while militarily decisive, did not erase a knowledge system that was, in many ways, more advanced than that of the conquerors themselves. It is a silent argument for the sophistication of a civilization that viewed human health as deeply interconnected with the botanical richness of the world around them. But if the Badianus Manuscript revealed a hidden world of science, our next secret uncovers a lost metropolis of breathtaking ambition, preserved in the pages of a book intended for a king. Imagine the scene when Hernan Cortés and his conquistadors first gazed upon the Valley of Mexico from the mountain passes. They saw a city built on a lake connected by causeways with gleaming white temples rising against the sky. The Spanish accounts speak of their utter astonishment, comparing Tenochtitlan to the enchanted cities of their own legends. They witnessed a marvel of urban planning, but they would soon dismantle it stone by stone, building their own colonial capital atop its ruins. For centuries, the true scale and sophistication of the original city remained a mystery, known only through these fading Spanish descriptions. That is, until scholars began to decipher the maps hidden within post-conquest codices, most famously the Codex Mendoza. Created around 1541, just 20 years after the fall, this book was commissioned by the first Spanish viceroy of New Spain to explain the Aztec Empire to Emperor Charles V. Within its pages, the artists, who were very likely indigenous scribes who had known the old city intimately, embedded a secret visual record of their lost world, a detailed map that is far more than a simple illustration. The map of Tenochtitlan in the Mendoza Codex is deceptively simple at first glance. It presents the city as a rectangle divided into 4 quarters by 2 great canals that cross at the center. But this is not a primitive drawing. It is a sophisticated conceptual map rich with symbolic meaning. At the very heart where the canals intersect sits the sacred precinct, dominated by the twin pyramids of the Templo Mayor. This was the Axis Mundi, the center of the Aztec universe, where the earthly and divine realms met. The choice to place it at the absolute center of the map was a deliberate act of preservation, a way of asserting the enduring spiritual and political importance of a place that the Spanish were actively trying to erase and replace with their own cathedral. The 4 quarters radiating outward correspond to the original calpuli, or neighborhood districts, that formed the city's foundational social and political units. Each district is marked with the glyph of its founding leader, weaving the history of the city's establishment directly into its geographical layout. This single image, therefore, secretly encodes not just a city plan, but a story of origin, social order, and cosmic belief. The true genius of the city's design is revealed in the details of this map. The grid-like pattern of blue lines representing canals shows an urban infrastructure that was incredibly advanced. Tenochtitlan was a Venice of the New World, a city built on an island in Lake Texcoco. These canals were not random waterways. They were a meticulously planned transportation network that allowed thousands of canoes to move people and goods efficiently from the bustling markets to the residential districts. Alongside these canals ran solid causeways, which also served as dikes, controlling water levels and preventing flooding, a remarkable feat of hydrological engineering. The map hints at this functional complexity, showing how movement and water management were central to the city's existence. Furthermore, the Codex reveals the existence of specialized zones, We see depictions of districts dedicated to specific guilds of artisans, the featherworkers, the goldsmiths, the potters. This indicates a highly organized economic system with centralized production, a level of urban specialization that rivaled any great city in Europe at the time. What makes these coded maps so poignant is that they were created under Spanish rule for a Spanish audience. The indigenous artists, in complying with the viceroy's request for information, performed a subtle act of intellectual resistance. They used the medium provided by the conqueror to secretly preserve the memory of their world's grandeur. The map is a testament to what was lost, but also a declaration of what had been achieved. It shows a city with a complex system of governance, a thriving economy, and an infrastructure built in harmony with a challenging aquatic environment. The Spanish may have been amazed by what they saw, but their written accounts often filtered it through a lens of superiority or outright horror. The maps in the Codices, however, present Tenochtitlan on its own terms, through the eyes of those who built it and called it home. They are not just maps, they are memorials in pigment, ensuring that the glory of the great city would not be forgotten. Its sophisticated blueprint hidden in plain sight within the pages of a book meant for a foreign king. While the grand stone and urban maps revealed a civilization's cosmic and physical order, the Aztecs also possessed a secret, portable technology for navigating the unseen forces of destiny itself. This brings us to the fourth secret, a system so integral to daily life that its influence reached into the very name a person carried and the major decisions of emperors. Hidden within the vibrant, esoteric pages of codices like those of the Borgia group is the Tonalpohualli, the 260-day sacred calendar. Far more than a simple method for tracking time, this was a complex divinatory machine, a spiritual compass used by priestly diviners to read the patterns of the universe and forecast the fate of individuals and the state. It represented a world where time was not a neutral, empty container but a dynamic, living force, imbued with sacred energies that could be understood and to some extent negotiated. The engine of the Tonalpohualli was a mesmerizingly simple yet infinitely complex combination of two interlocking cycles. The first cycle consisted of 20-day signs, each with its own profound symbolic meaning. These were not arbitrary labels but powerful spiritual forces. A day designated as Jaguar carried the essence of the night, of secrecy and shamanic power. A day named Wind was connected to Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, representing intelligence but also unpredictability and potential chaos. The sign of Rain, associated with the god Tlaloc, brought fertility but also the threat of destructive storms. Each of the 20 signs held a dual nature, a potential for both creative and destructive power. The second cycle was a continuous count from 1 to 13, represented by simple dots. The true magic happened as these two cycles spun alongside each other. Each day in the 260-day round was defined by a unique combination of a number from 1 to 13 and one of the 20-day signs. It would take 260 days for the same number and sign to coincide again, creating a vast web of unique energetic signatures for every single day. This system was the secret tool of the Tonalpohualli priests, the Tonalpauk, who were the master cryptographers of this divine code. Their role was to interpret the meaning of these combinations for every aspect of life. When a child was born, a priest would immediately cast its Tonalpohualli chart. The day sign and number combination on the birthday became the child's tonalli, their fate or soul's destiny. This was so important that it often became the basis for their name. A boy born on a day like 7 Flower might be given a name reflecting beauty and artistry, while a girl born on a day like 1 Jaguar might receive a name invoking strength and mystery. But the priest's job was not just to assign a fixed destiny. They would also look for potentially challenging combinations, a day sign associated with conflict or misfortune, and might prescribe specific rituals, offerings, or even a naming ceremony on a more auspicious subsequent day to balance the individual's fate. This was not a rigid determinism, but a system of spiritual navigation. The application of this secret knowledge extended far beyond the individual, shaping the very destiny of the Aztec state. No king would ascend to the throne, no army would march to war, and no major commercial treaty would be signed without first consulting the Tonopouhueli. Priests would meticulously calculate the energetic quality of proposed dates for a coronation or a battle, seeking alignments that promised victory, stability, and divine favor. A day like 4 movement, for instance, might be seen as highly favorable for initiating a long journey or a military campaign because it promised forward momentum. Conversely, a day like 5 Flint, with its association with conflict and sacrifice, might be chosen for a ritual of penance but avoided for a diplomatic mission. This embedded a deep sense of prophecy into the daily machinery of the empire. Every significant action was timed to harmonize with the perceived flow of cosmic energy, turning the abstract calendar into a practical guide for leadership. The survival and expansion of the Aztec Empire were therefore not seen as merely the result of military might, but as a consequence of correctly reading and aligning with this hidden prophetic timetable, a secret code for ruling in concert with the gods. Moving from the spiritual realm of prophecy to the tangible mechanics of power, we uncover a secret that reveals how the Aztec Empire physically sustained its grandeur. The codices hold within them not just maps and calendars, but meticulously kept ledgers of wealth, and our 5th secret exposes the very economic engine that fueled the state. This is found most vividly in the tribute lists of the Codex Mendoza, where page after page unfolds in a systematic grid, documenting the exact payments required from every corner of the empire. To the untrained Spanish eye, these might have appeared as simple inventories, a curiosity for a foreign king. But for the Aztec bureaucrats who compiled this information, it was the secret blueprint of their economic dominance, a detailed record of the immense resources that flowed into the capital, transforming Tenochtitlan into the richest city in the Americas. Each section of these lists is dedicated to a different conquered province, and the specificity is staggering. It was not enough to demand generic valuables. The Aztec tax collectors, the Calpics, required exact quantities of highly specific items. From the tropical lowlands came bundles of brilliantly green quetzal feathers, each one more precious than gold, destined for the magnificent headdresses of emperors and high priests. From the forests arrived jaguar skins, symbols of warrior prowess used for ceremonial regalia. Coastal provinces sent sacks of cocoa beans, which served as both a luxury drink for the elite and a form of currency. The lists include intricate shields made of gold and turquoise mosaic, lip plugs of polished obsidian and rich amber. Even seemingly mundane items like large quantities of maize, beans, and honey were recorded with precision, showing that the tribute system fed both the populace and the army. This was not random plunder, it was a highly organized system of taxation, designed to extract the unique resources of each region and centralize them in the capital. The true secret encoded in these lists, however, is the insight they provide into Aztec economic strategy. The empire was not merely a military power extracting wealth by force. It was a sophisticated state that understood and manipulated regional economies. By demanding specific goods from specific areas, the Aztec Triple Alliance effectively created specialized economic zones. A province known for its cotton fields would be required to pay its tribute in thousands of bolts of plain white cotton cloth, while another province, perhaps with skilled artisans, would provide finished garments, often with elaborate designs. This system encouraged, or rather enforced, regional specialization, making conquered territories economically dependent on the center for redistribution and trade. The flow of tribute was a constant visual reminder of who held power, arriving in the capital on the backs of porters in a continuous parade of submission and wealth. Beyond luxury items, the tribute lists reveal a deeper understanding of resource management and imperial control. The demands included large quantities of military equipment, standardized warrior costumes, shields, and weapons. This served a dual purpose. It equipped the ever-expanding Aztec armies, and just as importantly, it deliberately limited the military potential of the conquered provinces by draining them of the means to rebel. The system was also flexible. Provinces that were recently conquered or located in less resource-rich areas might pay their tribute in the most valuable resource of all, people. The Codices note the required delivery of men and women for slavery, or in some cases for religious sacrifice. This grim aspect of the economy shows how human labor and life itself were integrated into the fiscal structure of the empire, underpinning both its religious ideology and its practical need for a controlled labor force. The tribute lists were therefore far more than an accounting sheet. They were a dynamic tool of political and social engineering, a secret ledger of power that detailed not just what the empire owned, but how it ruled. While the tribute lists reveal the economic machinery of the empire, a far more profound and enduring secret lies in understanding how the Aztecs ensured their society's future. The true wealth of any civilization is not just in its material resources, but in the knowledge and character of its people. This brings us to a sixth secret, one that dismantles the colonial myth of a brutish, unschooled society. Hidden within the exhaustive pages of the Florentine Codex, a monumental work compiled by the Spanish friar Bernardino de Sahagun with the help of indigenous elders, is the blueprint for a remarkably sophisticated and mandatory state education system. From the highest nobles to the most humble commoners, every Aztec child was required to attend school, a concept that was revolutionary for its time and speaks to a deep societal investment in molding ideal citizens from a very young age. The system was built upon a fundamental division designed to uphold the social structure while providing a path for merit. For the children of the nobility, destined for roles as priests, scholars, military leaders, and government officials, there was the Comicac, or the house of the lineage. Attending a Comicac was an immense privilege and an even greater burden. Life within its walls was one of extreme discipline and austerity. Students, both boys and girls, were subjected to a rigorous routine that began before dawn with icy baths in the canals, intended to harden the body and spirit. They engaged in prolonged fasts and performed acts of self-sacrifice, such as piercing their tongues and earlobes with magi spines to offer their blood to the gods. This was not mere punishment, it was a fundamental part of their curriculum, teaching them the core Aztec value of sacrifice for the greater good. Their intellectual training was equally demanding. They learned to read and interpret the complex pictographic writing of the codices, memorizing the vast oral histories, intricate religious hymns, and the precise movements of the stars encoded in the Tonalpohualli. They were trained in rhetoric and law, preparing them to become judges and administrators capable of governing a vast empire. The Comicac was not just a school, it was a forge for the intellectual and spiritual elite, the guardians of the state's most sacred knowledge. For the vast majority of youth, the sons and daughters of commoners known as the Mesoamerican, education took place at the Tolpochcalli, or the House of Youth. While less focused on esoteric knowledge, the Tolpochcalli was no less vital to the empire's survival. Its primary purpose was to produce the backbone of Aztec society, disciplined farmers, skilled artisans, and most importantly, the formidable warriors of the army. Life here was communal and physically intense. Boys lived in a group house under the guidance of seasoned veteran warriors who drilled them relentlessly in the use of the macuahuitl, the obsidian-bladed sword, the atlatl spear thrower, and defensive tactics. They learned endurance by carrying heavy burdens over long distances, simulating the logistical demands of military campaigns, but the curriculum extended beyond warfare. They were taught the essential skills of agriculture, construction, and various crafts, ensuring every citizen could contribute productively to the state. Crucially, they were also instilled with a powerful sense of social responsibility and moral conduct. The Tolpochcali emphasized obedience, respect for elders, and communal living, reinforcing the idea that individual success was inextricably linked to the strength and harmony of the community as a whole. What makes this educational system a true secret, as revealed in the Codices, is its underlying philosophy of social engineering and its surprising flexibility. The division between the Comicac and Tolpochcali was not an impenetrable caste barrier. The Florentine Codex documents that a commoner boy who demonstrated exceptional courage and skill in battle could be recognized and promoted, earning the right to be transferred to a Comicac for advanced training and a path to officership. This created a crucial safety valve for ambition and talent, allowing the state to co-opt the most capable individuals from any background into the ruling class, thereby strengthening the empire with fresh blood and preventing discontent. For girls, the education was also carefully tailored. While noble girls in the Comicac were trained in the arts of healing, midwifery, and the intricate rituals surrounding temple worship, commoner girls at the Tolpochcali were instructed in weaving, cooking, and household management, skills essential for the domestic economy. This comprehensive, state-sponsored system ensured that every individual, regardless of gender or birth, understood their role and responsibilities, creating a highly organized, disciplined, and ideologically unified society. The secret to the Aztec Empire's power was not just its armies or its wealth, but this deeply embedded institution that systematically manufactured loyalty, skill, and a shared sense of purpose in each new generation. Beneath the grand narratives of cosmology and empire, the Aztecs perfected a secret that was both elegant and incredibly efficient, a complete writing system that required no alphabet. To the uninitiated, the pages of a codex might look like a series of beautiful but simplistic pictures. This is a profound misunderstanding. The Aztecs developed a sophisticated, flexible form of communication known as Nahuatl writing, a logosyllabic system where glyphs could represent entire words, specific syllables, or even abstract ideas. This was not primitive art. It was a highly advanced method of recording history, law, and literature, and mastering its rules is like learning to read a secret code that unlocks the true voice of a civilization. The foundation of this system lies in its dual nature. Some glyphs are logograms, where a single image stands for an entire word or concept. The glyph for a hill, or tepetl in Nahuatl, is a straightforward illustration of a hill. But the genius of the system emerges when these logograms are used for their sound rather than their meaning, a principle known as rebuse writing. For instance, the word for conquest is Yacatetl. To write this, a scribe wouldn't try to draw the abstract idea of conquest. Instead, they would combine two simpler glyphs, the glyph for nose, which is Yacatl, and the glyph for stone, which is Tetl. By putting the nose glyph next to the stone glyph, they phonetically spell out Yacatetl, or conquest. This allowed them to write complex names, places, and verbs using a limited set of recognizable images. A ruler's name, like Itzcotl obsidian snake, would be written with the glyph for obsidian and the glyph for a snake, creating a name that is both visually striking and phonetically precise. This method gave scribes an incredible flexibility to record the nuances of their spoken language with remarkable accuracy. Color in these codices was never merely decorative. It was a vital part of the grammatical and symbolic vocabulary. Each hue carried a deep, specific meaning that added a layer of secret information to the glyphs. The most significant color was arguably a brilliant blue-green known as Zihuatl. This color, often made from fine turquoise powder, was synonymous with water, vitality, and preciousness. When applied to a glyph, it could transform its meaning. A simple serpent glyph painted in this turquoise blue became Zucotl, the celestial fire serpent, a weapon of the gods. When used to depict a piece of jade or a feather, it emphasized its immense value. Most importantly, this blue-green was the color of royalty. depicting a ruler's turquoise diadem or his regalia in this color was a direct statement of his divine right to rule, connecting him to the life-giving forces of water and the sacredness of the sky. Other colors held similar power. The vibrant red of cochineal blood symbolized life, sacrifice, and the warmth of the sun, while a stark bone white could represent death or the mystical realm of the ancestors. A skilled scribe used this chromatic code to tell the viewer not just what was happening, but how to feel about it and what spiritual forces were at play. The placement and arrangement of glyphs on the page created yet another layer of encrypted meaning. The Aztecs did not write in rigid left-to-right lines like we do. Instead, they organized information spatially to reflect importance and relationship. A central figure, like an emperor or a god, would be depicted large in the center of a page. The glyphs related to his actions, his name, or the date of an event would be arranged around him, often connected by a subtle line or simply by proximity. The spatial grammar helped to tell the story. A glyph placed above another might indicate superiority or something that happened first, while a glyph placed below could signify subordination or a consequence. A series of footprints leading from one glyph to another was the standard way to depict a journey or a migration path. This visual syntax allowed for a dynamic and non-linear reading of history, where the relative size, position, and connection of elements conveyed complex narratives of power, chronology, and causality in a single, masterful composition. Understanding this language reveals that every codex page is a dense, literary text. What appears as a simple scene of a ruler receiving tribute is actually a detailed record. The ruler is identified by his name glyph. The date of the event is given by a combination of dots and a day sign. The specific items being offered are depicted with precise glyphs, and the origin of the tribute is indicated by the place glyph of the conquered province. A single, well-composed page could therefore act as a legal document, a historical archive, and a religious text all at once. This system was so effective and deeply ingrained that after the Spanish conquest, indigenous scribes adapted it to create hybrid documents, using Aztec glyphs to annotate Spanish legal texts or to map their ancestral land claims for colonial courts. In these documents, the secret language lived on, a subtle tool of cultural preservation used to assert rights and record history under the nose of the new rulers. The glyphs were far more than pictures. They were the resilient voice of a people, encoding their world in a form that was both beautiful and brilliantly pragmatic. The previous secrets have shown us the Aztecs' mastery of the tangible world, their cities, their economy, their systems of knowledge. But to truly understand their actions, we must now plunge into the very foundation of their reality, a secret encoded in their most profound creation myth. The story of the five sons, meticulously recorded in codices like the Vaticanus A, is far more than a simple tale of origins. It is the central pillar of the Aztec worldview, a cosmic drama that explains humanity's precarious existence and its sacred, terrifying duty. This narrative reveals a universe not of stability, but of constant, cyclical destruction and rebirth, a concept that instilled a deep-seated urgency into every aspect of Aztec life. According to the myth, our world is not the first, but the fifth in a series of failed creations. Each previous era, or sun, was governed by a different deity and populated by a different race of beings, and each met a cataclysmic end. The first sun, known as Ford Jaguar, was a time ruled by the god Tezcatlipoca. The giants who lived in this epoch were eventually devoured by jaguars, bringing the first age to a violent close. The second sun, Four Wind, was presided over by Quetzalcoatl. This world was destroyed by monstrous hurricanes that swept away its inhabitants, who were transformed into monkeys. The third sun, Four Rain, was under the dominion of Tlaloc, the rain god. Its end came in a torrent of fiery rain, likely volcanic ash that consumed everything, and its people turned into turkeys. The fourth sun, Four Water, was governed by Chalchutlecu, the goddess of water. This era ended in a great flood that lasted for 52 years, drowning the world and transforming its people into fish. Each of these destructions was not a random act of chaos, but a consequence of the gods falling out of balance, a recurring theme of divine conflict that doomed each successive experiment in creation. The current era, our era, is the fifth sun, known as form movement. Its genesis is the most dramatic and reveals the high stakes of the Aztec cosmos. The Codices depict a grand council of gods gathered in the darkness at the ancient city of Teotihuacan, faced with the silence of a sunless sky. A fundamental question hung in the void: which deity would have the courage to immolate themselves to create a new sun? Two gods stepped forward, the proud and wealthy Tenochtitlan and the humble, diseased Nanahuatzin, who was covered in boils. Two great pyres were built, but when the moment came for sacrifice, Tenochtitlan faltered 4 times in the face of the immense flames. It was Nanahuatzin, without hesitation, who leaped first into the divine fire, blazing forth as the new sun. Shamed by this act of courage, Tenochtitlan then jumped in after him, becoming a second, equally bright sun. But the gods saw that 2 suns of equal power could not exist. So one of them took a rabbit and threw it into the face of Tenochtitlan, dimming his brilliance and transforming him into the moon. Yet the story does not end there. The new sun, Tenochtitlan, now hung motionless in the sky. He demanded a price for his movement. He required nourishment. The other gods, understanding that the sacrifice had to be complete, then offered their own blood, their own lives, to set the sun on its daily journey. This is the ultimate secret of the myth. The fifth sun was born from self-sacrifice and can only continue through ongoing sacrifice. This cyclical narrative of creation and destruction was not merely a story to be told. It was a terrifying and urgent reality for the Aztecs. They believed they were living in the final, fragile era, destined to be annihilated by violent earthquakes, a fate symbolized by the name form movement. The world was inherently unstable, and the sun's journey was a constant battle against the forces of darkness. Every sunrise was a victory that had to be earned anew each day. This is where the secret message of the myth becomes clear. The responsibility for staving off this ultimate catastrophe fell directly on humanity. The gods had already given their blood to start the sun moving. It was now humanity's sacred duty to provide the ongoing sustenance, the sacred energy, or Chalchahuath, required to keep it alive. This energy was found in the most precious substance, human blood offered in ritual sacrifice. Seen through this lens, the much misunderstood Aztec practice of human sacrifice transforms from an act of mere bloodlust into a profound, collective act of cosmic preservation. The priests who performed these rites were not murderers. They were cosmic technicians performing essential maintenance on the very engine of the universe. The blood of warriors captured in battle, considered the most potent offering, was the fuel that prevented the sun from stalling and plunging the world into eternal night. A failed harvest, a lost war, a social disorder, these were not just bad luck. They were potential signs that the offerings were insufficient, that the balance was tipping toward the final earthquake. The story of the 5 suns, therefore, instilled a powerful sense of purpose and responsibility. It justified imperial expansion, as more territory meant more tributary states that could provide sacrificial victims. It enforced social cohesion, as every citizen had a role to play in the rituals that sustained the cosmos. This myth was the ultimate secret driving the Aztec Empire, a story that convinced an entire civilization that their survival and the survival of the world itself depended on their unwavering commitment to nourishing the sun. It was a burden of existential dread and sacred purpose, encoded in the colorful pages of their most treasured books. This journey into the heart of the Aztec world has taken us from cosmic cycles to the mechanics of empire, but perhaps one of the most persistent misconceptions surrounds the lives of women. The popular image, heavily influenced by early Spanish chronicles, often reduces Aztec women to a shadowy existence, confined to the home and subordinate to men in all things. Yet, when we learn to read the codices with a discerning eye, a far more complex and empowering reality emerges, one where women were dynamic forces in the spiritual, economic, and social fabric of their world. The secret lies not in a single codex, but in piecing together clues from the Florentine Codex, the Codex Mendoza, and the powerful stone monuments that survived the conquest. To understand the potential for female power, we must first look to the divine. The Aztec pantheon was filled with formidable goddesses who embodied creation, destruction, and everything in between. Consider the story of Coyolxauhqui, the moon goddess, whose dismembered body is famously depicted on a massive stone disc discovered at the base of the Templo Mayor. The myth recounts her attempt to lead a rebellion against her mother, the earth goddess Coatlicue, only to be defeated and dismembered by her brother, the war god Huitzilopochtli. While this might seem like a tale of female defeat, its very presence at the sacred center of the empire signals something profound. Coyolxauhqui was a powerful warrior deity in her own right, a leader who challenged authority. Her image, carved into the very stones where sacrifices were performed, served as a permanent reminder of the consequences of discord, but also of the immense power that women could wield, even in the martial sphere. Then there is Tlazolteotl, a goddess of astonishing complexity. She was simultaneously the patroness of filth and misdeeds, the goddess who could cleanse individuals of their sins through confession, and the deity of fertility and midwifery. She embodied the entire cycle of human transgression, purification, and rebirth, a scope of influence that no male god could claim. These divine figures were not marginal. They were central to the Aztec understanding of the universe, providing powerful archetypes of female strength, wisdom, and transformative power that resonated throughout society. Moving from the celestial to the earthly, the codices provide vivid evidence of women's crucial economic roles. The Florentine Codex contains detailed illustrations of women as master weavers, creating the magnificent and highly valued textiles that were a cornerstone of the Aztec economy. They worked with backstrap looms, producing intricate patterns on cotton and Meiji fiber cloth that served as both everyday clothing and a form of currency. This was not merely domestic chore work, it was a skilled craft that generated significant wealth. The tribute lists in the Codex Mendoza explicitly record thousands of bolts of cloth as required payments from conquered provinces, underscoring that textile production was an industry of state importance, driven predominantly by female labor. Beyond weaving, women were active participants in the bustling marketplaces, or tianquistli, that were the lifeblood of every city. The Florentine Codex describes and illustrates women as vendors, selling everything from prepared food and spices to handicrafts. They engaged in trade, bartered goods, and managed their own wealth. Some women, particularly those from merchant Pochteca families, could even amass considerable fortunes through long-distance trade, operating with a degree of economic independence that would have been unthinkable for many of their European contemporaries. Perhaps the most telling secret of all concerns the realm of law and inheritance. Spanish colonial law was intensely patriarchal, but the pre-Hispanic legal traditions preserved in the codices reveal a different standard. Aztec women could own property in their own name, both land and movable goods acquired through their own work or received as inheritance. Upon marriage, it was customary for a bride's family to provide her with a plot of land which would remain her property throughout her life. If she were widowed, she would inherit a portion of her husband's estate to support herself and her children. This legal standing gave women a tangible foundation of security and autonomy. In the religious sphere, women held positions of great respect and influence as priestesses. Dedicated to specific goddesses like Chichimequotl, the maize deity, or the fertility goddess Xochiquetzal, these women lived within temple complexes, overseeing rituals, making offerings, and serving as oracles and healers. Young girls from noble families were often educated in the Comicac alongside boys, learning the sacred songs, calendrical knowledge, and ritual practices necessary for these roles. The presence of these educated, spiritually powerful women further dismantles the stereotype of universal female subservience. The picture that emerges from the codices is not one of simple equality, but of a nuanced and complementary dynamic. Aztec society was undoubtedly patriarchal, with men holding the primary positions of political and military leadership. However, women operated within a parallel sphere of influence that was equally vital to the empire's functioning. They were the keepers of the household economy, the engines of a major industry, active market traders, respected religious figures, and individuals with defined legal rights. Their power was different from that of men, but it was real, recognized, and essential. To see Aztec women only through the lens of 16th century European gender norms is to miss the secret that the codices have preserved for us. A society that, for all its fierceness, understood and valued the indispensable contributions of women, creating a social fabric where both genders wove threads of crucial importance into the survival and glory of their world. Moving from the earthly realm of social structure and law, we now turn our gaze upward to the night sky, where the Aztecs discovered another layer of cosmic order. The most enigmatic and visually stunning insights into their celestial knowledge are preserved in a masterpiece known as the Borgia Codex. Unlike the Mendoza or Florentine codices, which were created after the conquest, the Borgia group is believed to be a pre-Hispanic document, one of the very rare survivors from the time before the Spanish arrival. Its pages are a mesmerizing tapestry of complex deities, abstract symbols, and intricate patterns painted on a long strip of deerskin. For a long time, its meaning was completely impenetrable to Western scholars who saw only a chaotic collection of occult images. But as researchers began to crack its visual code, they realized they were not looking at random mythology. They were holding an advanced astronomical almanac, a secret guide to the movements of the heavens. The codex is filled with illustrations that initially appear to be purely symbolic or decorative. We see bands of stars, stepped fret patterns that resemble architectural features, and deities adorned with specific sets of dots and bars. However, a meticulous analysis reveals that many of these patterns correspond with astonishing accuracy to the cycles of the most prominent celestial bodies. One of the most compelling secrets lies in the depiction of the planet Venus, known to the Aztecs as Tlahuizcalpantecutli, the Lord of the Dawn. The Borgia Codex contains numerous pages tracking its appearances as both the morning and evening star over a series of 584 days. This is not a random number, it is the precise length of the Venus synodic cycle, the time it takes for the planet to return to the same position relative to the Sun as seen from Earth. The Codex doesn't just note the cycle, it details the different phases, correlating each appearance with specific auguries and potential influences on human events. Another profound astronomical secret hidden within these painted pages is the tracking of eclipses. The Aztecs, like many ancient cultures, viewed eclipses with a mixture of awe and terror, seeing them as moments when the cosmic order was threatened. The Borgia Codex appears to contain a method for predicting these ominous events. Scholars have identified sequences that may represent the 1880-day cycle of the Maya, which is 365-day years, which is a period after which eclipses tend to repeat. The Codex illustrates these dangerous times with powerful imagery, such as the sun god being devoured by a celestial monster, a vivid metaphor for a solar eclipse. By charting these cycles, the priest astronomers could anticipate periods of cosmic vulnerability and prepare the necessary rituals to strengthen the sun and moon, ensuring the gods would prevail against the threatening darkness. Beyond tracking individual planets and events, the Borgia Codex suggests the Aztecs mapped the heavens with a sophisticated understanding of constellations. While they did not group stars into the same figures as Greek astronomy, They saw their own patterns in the night sky. The Codex depicts bands of stars that likely correspond to the Milky Way, which they visualized as a great celestial serpent. They also identified constellations that represented animals and objects from their world, such as a rattlesnake or a scorpion, whose rising and setting marked important seasonal changes for agriculture. The placement of these celestial figures alongside calendrical dates in the Codex indicates they were used as a kind of star clock, helping to refine the solar calendar and signal the optimal times for planting and harvesting. This practical application demonstrates that their astronomy was deeply intertwined with the survival and prosperity of their society. But the ultimate secret of the Borgia Codex is not merely that the Aztecs were skilled observers of the sky. Their motivation went far beyond simple scientific curiosity or agricultural planning. For them, astronomy was a form of theology. They believed the cosmos was a visible manifestation of the God's will and a blueprint for divine intention. The predictable cycles of Venus, the ominous but calculable occurrence of eclipses, and the steady procession of the constellations were all part of a sacred text written in light. By deciphering this celestial code, the Tonalpauc, the priest astronomers, could synchronize human activity with the rhythm of the universe. A ritual performed when Venus rose as the morning star would have a different potency than one performed during its evening appearance. Launching a military campaign under an auspicious constellation could mean the difference between victory and defeat. The Borgia Codex was therefore a vital tool for divine diplomacy, a manual that allowed humanity to act in concert with the gods, ensuring that their rituals, their wars, and their very lives were in harmony with the cosmic order. It was their secret key to navigating not just the physical world, but the intentions of the deities who governed it. Beneath the grand spectacle of empire and the intricate calculations of the cosmos, the Aztecs cultivated a secret world of profound introspection, a tradition they expressed through what they considered the highest form of art, poetry. They called it in Xochitl in Cuicatl, which translates to flower and song. This beautiful phrase is far more than a simple label. It is a powerful metaphor that encapsulates the Aztec view of artistic creation. A flower represents the fleeting, exquisite beauty of a moment, while a song signifies the enduring essence that gives it meaning. Together, they express the idea that true poetry is a delicate, ephemeral creation that, like a blossom, offers a moment of transcendent beauty before it fades, its truth carried forward in the memory of its song. This reveals a dimension of Aztec life that stands in stark contrast to the common perception of a society obsessed only with war and sacrifice. It shows us a people who are deeply philosophical, who grappled with the same fundamental questions about existence that have preoccupied thinkers across time and cultures. We are fortunate that this secret tradition was preserved, largely thanks to the work of Spanish friars like Bernardino de Sahagun, who, in his mission to understand indigenous culture to better convert it, had the wisdom to record the songs and poems of the elder nobility. These were not written in codices in the same way as tribute lists or calendars. They were part of a vibrant oral tradition, memorized and performed. Sahagun's informants recited them, and his scribes transcribed them into the Roman alphabet, preserving the Nahuatl language and its exquisite imagery for posterity. The poems that survive are not simple chants or battle hymns. They are sophisticated, lyrical explorations of the deepest human concerns, the nature of truth, the pain of mortality, and the yearning to understand the divine. One of the most recurring and poignant themes in this poetry is the concept of Tlazocamote, which means to be rooted in the earth and carries a sense of profound fragility. The poets constantly remind us that life on earth is transient, a mere dream from which we will all too soon awaken. A famous poem attributed to the ruler of Texcoco, Nezahualcoyotl, who was himself a revered poet, captures this feeling with aching beauty. It reads in one translation, "Truly do we live on earth, not forever on earth, only a little while here. Though it be jade, it shatters, though it be gold, it breaks." Though it be Quetzal plumage it tears apart, not forever on earth, only a little while here. This is not a lament of despair, but a clear-eyed meditation on impermanence. The poet uses the most precious substances in the Aztec world, jade, gold, Quetzal feathers, to illustrate that even the most brilliant and strong-seeming things are subject to decay. This philosophy instilled a value system that prized making the most of one's brief time, of creating beauty and performing meaningful deeds that will be remembered in the song left behind. Beyond meditations on mortality, this poetic tradition explores the very nature of truth and divinity. The Aztecs had a philosophical concept known as neltalistli, which means rootedness or truth. The poets sought to understand what is truly real in a world of illusions. They often expressed a sense of mystery, that the ultimate truth, the will of the giver of life, was unknowable to human beings. Another poem expresses this quest. Do we speak any truth here, O giver of life? We merely dream, we are only waking from a dream. All here is like a dream, no one speaks of truth here. This is a remarkably sophisticated and even skeptical viewpoint. It acknowledges the limitations of human perception and reason, suggesting that our earthly understanding is provisional, a kind of dream compared to the ultimate reality of the divine. This reveals a culture capable of deep philosophical doubt, far removed from the stereotype of blind religious dogma. The imagery used in these poems is consistently drawn from the natural world, but it is charged with symbolic meaning that any Aztec listener would have understood. When a poet speaks of flowery war, they are not referring to a bloodless battle. They are using the metaphor of the flower, which must be cut to be enjoyed, to describe the sacred conflict whose purpose was to obtain sacrificial victims, the most precious flowers to nourish the gods. The song that arises from such a war is the spiritual merit earned by the warrior. Similarly, references to turquoise, jade, and Quetzal feathers are not just displays of wealth. They are metaphors for anything that is precious, beautiful, and divine. A poet might describe a truth as a string of jades, implying something of lasting value and perfect clarity. This complex symbolic language allowed the poets to communicate layers of meaning, weaving together the earthly and the spiritual into a single, resonant image. This secret world of flower and song was not a marginal hobby. It was central to the identity of the Aztec elite. Royal courts valued poets as highly as they did brave warriors and skilled architects. A ruler like Nezahualcoyotl was celebrated not just for his military conquests and the magnificent gardens and aqueducts he built, but for his poetic genius. His court at Texcoco was a renowned center of intellectual and artistic activity. This tells us that the ideal Aztec noble was a multifaceted individual, a person of action, a person of faith, and a person of profound reflection. The ability to compose and appreciate poetry was a mark of a cultivated mind, a sign that one understood the deeper currents of existence beyond the battlefield and the marketplace. It was through Xochitl in Cuauhtémoc that the Aztecs explored their own humanity, giving voice to their doubts, their sorrows, and their awe in the face of a mysterious and magnificent universe. This literary tradition is perhaps the most personal of all the secrets hidden in the codices, offering us not a map of an empire, but a map of the Aztec soul. While the poetic and philosophical traditions explored the inner world, the Aztecs displayed an equally meticulous eye for the world teeming with life around them. Our 12th secret reveals that many codices function as incredibly detailed encyclopedias of Mesoamerican fauna, demonstrating a level of zoological observation that was both scientifically precise and deeply spiritual. The artists who painted these books possessed an uncanny ability to capture the essence of each creature, from the powerful musculature of a prowling jaguar to the intricate scale patterns of a rattlesnake. But these were not mere field guides for identification. The true secret lies in understanding that for the Aztecs, the animal kingdom was a vast, living text where every species was a character in a divine drama. its behaviors and attributes imbued with profound symbolic meaning that guided everything from statecraft to personal destiny. Consider the illustrations found in codices like the Borgia or the Florentine. The jaguar or ocelotl is not just drawn, it is rendered with a masterful understanding of its anatomy and behavior. Its spotted coat is depicted with careful attention to pattern. Its posture conveys a sense of latent power, and its eyes hold a fierce intelligence. This accuracy was essential because the jaguar was far more than a predator. It was the ultimate symbol of the knight, of shamanic power, and of royal authority. As the most powerful feline in the Americas, it ruled the shadowy realm of the underworld. Warriors who displayed exceptional bravery were honored with the title of Oslopili, or Jaguar Knight, and were permitted to wear its pelt into battle, symbolically taking on the animal's strength and ferocity. The eagle, or Cuautli, receives similar treatment. Its sharp talons, hooked beak, and powerful wings are illustrated with a naturalist's eye. Yet the eagle was the sovereign of the day, a creature that soared closest to the sun god Tenochtitlan. It represented celestial power, vision, and the masculine principle of the sky. The eagle warriors were the counterparts to the jaguar knights, forming the two most elite military orders. The very organization of the Aztec army was thus a reflection of their zoological worldview, structuring human hierarchies around the perceived qualities of the animal kingdom. This symbolic system extended to creatures of every size and habitat. The serpent, or codal, is a recurring figure, often depicted with startling realism, its sinuous body coiling across the pages. But its meaning could shift dramatically depending on context and adornment. A simple rattlesnake might represent danger, earth, and cunning. However, when that serpent was adorned with the beautiful green feathers of the Quetzal bird, it transformed into the magnificent Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent. This mythical creature was not seen as a literal animal but as a fusion of two potent symbols, the serpent's earthly wisdom and connection to the ground, and the Quetzal bird's association with the sky, freedom, and the divine. Quetzalcoatl thus became the god of wind, wisdom, and life itself, embodying the sacred union of heaven and earth. Even smaller animals carried weighty meanings. The rabbit, or Tenochtitlan, frequently illustrated nibbling on plants, was a symbol of fertility and promiscuity, but also of the pulp god, Tenochtitlan, and therefore of intoxication and artistic inspiration. The owl, with its nocturnal habits and haunting call, was an omen of death and witchcraft, a messenger from the dark realms. The Aztecs did not simply observe animals, they listened to them, believing their appearances and behaviors were messages from the gods, a form of natural augury known as tonalpauly. This deep zoological knowledge was systematically organized and applied, particularly by the professional merchant spies known as the Pochteka. These long-distance traders were the empire's eyes and ears in far-off lands, and their training included memorizing the animals, plants, and resources of every region. Codices served as their secret manuals, containing detailed illustrations of regional fauna that helped them identify valuable commodities, like the specific hummingbirds whose iridescent feathers were prized for mosaics, or the elusive ocelot whose spotted fur was a mark of high status. But their understanding went beyond commerce. If a Pochteka on a journey deep into Maya territory encountered an animal not native to the Valley of Mexico, say, a tapir or a howler monkey, he would not just note its existence. He would interpret its significance based on the symbolic codex. The appearance of a strange creature could be a critical omen, determining whether to proceed with a trade mission, retreat, or send a warning back to Tenochtitlan. The natural world was a continuous source of divine communication, and the ability to read its animal signs was a crucial form of strategic intelligence. Ultimately, the secret hidden within these zoological codices is a worldview that saw no separation between the scientific and the sacred. To accurately depict a hummingbird's beak or a deer's gait was an act of reverence, a way of honoring the complex creation of the gods. Each animal was a testament to the fertility and ingenuity of the divine forces that shaped the world. This perspective fostered a form of ecological awareness, a recognition that humanity was part of an intricate web of life where every creature, from the mightiest eagle to the most humble beetle, had a role and a purpose. The codices, therefore, are not just records of what animals looked like. They are maps of a mental universe where the flight of a bird could predict the fate of an empire and the growl of a jaguar could convey the voice of a god. This profound interconnection between zoological observation and spiritual belief reveals a civilization that sought to live in conscious, attentive dialogue with every living thing around them. Having charted the movements of stars and explored the inner landscapes of poetry, we now turn to a secret that grounded the Aztecs in their own history, a narrative of origin that was as much a spiritual map as it was a political manifesto. The story of their epic migration from the mythical homeland of Aztlan to the Valley of Mexico is one of the most powerful legends preserved in the codices, most vividly in the Borgia Codex. This document, also known as the Tierra de la Peregrinación, is a unique treasure. It is a long, continuous strip of amate paper that unfurls like a pictorial scroll, telling the story of the Mexica people's journey panel by panel. Unlike the colorful, finished pages of the Codex Mendoza, the Borgia is rendered entirely in black ink, giving it a stark, almost urgent quality, as if the story itself was too important to wait for the adornment of color. It is a literal and figurative timeline, a secret history painted on bark paper that served as the foundational myth of an empire. The Codex begins its narrative in the year 1 Flint, depicted by a simple glyph of a flint knife alongside a single dot. From this starting point, it shows the Aztecs, then a humble tribe known as the Mexica, departing from their island homeland of Aztlan, which is illustrated as a place surrounded by water with a grand temple at its center. Their departure is not shown as a voluntary search for new opportunities, but as a divine command. The central figure guiding them throughout the entire journey is their patron deity, Huitzilopochtli, the god of sun and war. He is represented not as a physical being walking among them, but by a sacred bundle carried on the back of a priest. This portable idol contained the relics of the god and was the ultimate source of authority, a divine compass guiding their every step. The journey depicted is not a straightforward march, but a long and arduous pilgrimage lasting generations, with stops at various locations, each marked by a place glyph and a year glyph to track their progress through time and space. The true secret of this migration narrative, however, lies in its purpose. This was not merely a record of historical events. It was a carefully crafted story designed to legitimize Aztec power. By the time the empire reached its zenith, the Mexica were relative newcomers to the Valley of Mexico, a region already dominated by older, more established city-states with their own claims to nobility and antiquity. The migration story, as encoded in the Borgia, served as a powerful rebuttal to any who would question their right to rule. It established their divine pedigree, proving that their arrival and subsequent dominance were not an accident of history but the fulfillment of a prophecy. They were not opportunistic invaders. They were a people chosen by a powerful god, fulfilling a sacred destiny that began centuries earlier in a hallowed, mythical place. This political agenda is most evident in the prophecies that Huitzilopochtli delivers to his people along the way, as illustrated in the Codex. The god does not simply guide them, he tests them and makes specific promises that justify their future actions. At a key location called Coatepec, or Serpent Mountain, a pivotal event occurs that solidifies their identity. The Codex depicts the story of Huitzilopochtli's miraculous birth, springing forth fully armed from his mother, the goddess Coatlicue, to defeat his sister Coyolxauhqui and her 400 brothers who intended to kill them. This myth, inserted into the migration narrative, was profoundly symbolic. It portrayed Huitzilopochtli as a victorious warrior from the very beginning, establishing a divine precedent for the Mexica's own military prowess and their right to conquer others in the name of their god. It framed their future wars not as aggression, but as a sacred duty, a reenactment of their god's primordial victory over chaos. The culmination of the entire Borgia Codex is the moment of arrival and the founding of Tenochtitlan, an event so significant it is depicted with iconic clarity. The prophecy given by Huitzilopochtli was that they would know they had reached their promised land when they saw an eagle perched on a cactus devouring a snake. The Codex shows this exact scene. A majestic eagle stands on a prickly pear cactus growing from a rock in the middle of a lake. This image is so central to Aztec identity that it forms the central emblem of the modern Mexican flag. For the Mexica, finding this sign was the ultimate validation of their entire struggle. It was incontrovertible proof that they were indeed the chosen people, destined to build their great city on that specific spot. The swampy, undesirable islands in Lake Texcoco were transformed through this narrative into a divinely ordained capital. The Codex ends with the founding of the Templo Maya, the axis mundi of their world, directly linking the completion of their physical journey to the establishment of their spiritual and political center. The secret history of the migration was therefore the ultimate tool of legitimacy, a story told and retold to justify the Aztec Empire's existence, convincing both the rulers and the ruled that their power was not just earned, but ordained by the gods themselves. But if the migration codices gave the Aztecs their divine right to rule, the practical application of that authority was forged on the battlefield. The next secret shifts our focus from sacred history to the brutal, codified art of war, a system whose intricate details are laid bare in the vivid pages of the Codex Mendoza. Here we move beyond the abstract justifications for empire and into the gritty reality of how it was built and maintained. The codices reveal that Aztec warfare was not a chaotic free-for-all of conquest. It was a highly ritualized and strategic institution, governed by complex rules and driven by a powerful social engine that offered every commoner a path to glory. It was a system where a man's worth was measured not by his birth, but by the number of prisoners he could bring back alive. At the heart of this military machine were the legendary warrior societies, the most elite of which were the Eagle and Jaguar Knights. The codices depict these warriors with breathtaking detail, their identities completely transformed by ornate, full-body suits of armor. An eagle knight is shown clad in a feathered suit patterned after the bird's plumage, complete with a fearsome, open-beaked helmet that allowed the warrior to see out while presenting a terrifying avian visage to the enemy. Similarly, a jaguar knight wears the spotted pelt of the great cat, the head serving as his helmet. These were not just uniforms, they were symbolic embodiments. By wearing the skin of the eagle, the warrior was taking on the attributes of the sovereign of the sky, the creature closest to the sun god. Donning the jaguar pelt connected him to the lord of the underworld, the master of the night and shamanic power. Becoming a member of one of these orders was the highest honor a warrior could achieve, but it was not a title bestowed by nobility. It was earned through relentless, proven courage on the battlefield. The primary weapon of these warriors, famously illustrated in the codices, was the macuahuitl, often described as a sword. It was more accurately a stout, paddle-shaped wooden club. Its secret and its devastating effectiveness lay along its edges, which were embedded with razor-sharp blades of obsidian. This volcanic glass can be knapped to an edge far sharper than even modern steel. The Codex Mendoza shows warriors wielding these weapons with deadly intent, but the illustrations also reveal a crucial detail often missed. The goal was not to kill the opponent outright. A skilled warrior was trained to use the macuahuitl to disable and wound, to strike at the legs or arms and bring an enemy combatant to the ground without dealing a fatal blow. The objective was always capture. This speaks to the fundamental purpose of Aztec combat in the context of their worldview. While wars of conquest were certainly fought for territory and tribute, the individual soldier's motivation was deeply tied to the spiritual need for sacrificial victims. A dead enemy was of little value. A living, captured warrior was a precious offering, a flower for the gods. This leads to the complex and often misunderstood rules of engagement, known as the Flowery War or Xochitl. These were not wars of annihilation. They were pre-arranged, ritualized battles fought at specific times and on agreed-upon fields between the Aztecs and their rival city-states, most notably Tlaxcala. The primary purpose of these conflicts was not to conquer land but to obtain captives for sacrifice. For the Aztec state, it was a way to ensure a steady supply of the sacred energy needed to nourish the gods, a direct acting out of the cosmic duty revealed in the story of the five sons. For the individual warrior, it was everything. His social standing, his wealth, and his entire future were determined by his performance in these battles. The codices show a clear hierarchy of status based on captures. A young man who took his first prisoner was permitted to wear certain ornaments and receive land grants. With each subsequent capture, his rank and privileges increased. The ultimate achievement was to capture 4 enemies, which made one eligible for entry into the revered eagle or jaguar orders. This system created a powerful, self-perpetuating cycle of military fervor. The most profound secret embedded in these war codices is how this system functioned as the primary engine of social mobility in a highly stratified society. For a commoner or Mesoamerican, there were very few paths to elevate his family's status and wealth. He could not inherit a noble title, but through sheer courage and martial skill on the battlefield, he could earn it. The codices are filled with depictions of commoners being honored by the emperor himself for their bravery, receiving gifts of fine kloops, jewelry, and the right to hold land and keep a portion of the tribute from conquered peoples. A successful warrior could even see his sons given the privilege of education in the noble Comicac school. This was a revolutionary concept. It meant that the state could constantly refresh its military leadership with the most talented and motivated individuals from any background, co-opting ambition and turning it into a force that strengthened the empire. The promise of honor and a better life fueled the Aztec war machine far more effectively than simple conscription ever could. Warfare was not just a duty, it was a lottery of social advancement, a brutal but effective meritocracy that ensured the empire's armies were always filled with men hungry for glory. But beyond the gods themselves, behind the masks of Huitzilopochtli and Quetzalcoatl, lies a deeper and more abstract secret. A philosophical concept so fundamental that it underpins the entire Aztec worldview. This is the idea of Teotl. For a long time, this Nahuatl word was simply translated as God, but modern scholars delving into the poetic and philosophical passages of the codices have uncovered a much more profound meaning. Teotl is not a personified deity sitting on a cloud. It is the fundamental, animating force of the entire cosmos. It is an impersonal, ever-flowing, and ever-changing energy that permeates every single aspect of existence, from the largest star to the smallest grain of maize. Think of it as a sacred current that flows through the universe, a single, unified substance that manifests as both creation and destruction, life and death, order and chaos. The gods themselves were not the source of this energy. They were its most powerful and recognizable manifestations, personified channels through which the immense power of Teotl could be understood and approached by humanity. This understanding transforms our perception of Aztec religion. It was less a pantheon of distinct, squabbling personalities and more a complex system for mapping and interacting with different facets of a single divine energy. Tlaloc, the rain god, was the personification of Teotl as it manifests in life-giving water and destructive storms. Quetzalcoatl was Teotl expressed as wind, wisdom, and the gentle breath of life. Even the seemingly opposing forces of creation and destruction were not seen as a battle between good and evil, but as complementary and necessary phases in the cyclical flow of Teotl. A forest fire destroys, but it also clears the way for new growth. This dynamic, ever-changing nature of the energy is key. The Aztecs saw the universe not as a static creation, but as a living, breathing process, a continuous dance of energies coming into balance, falling out of balance, and being rebalanced again. Stability was not a permanent state to be achieved, but a momentary harmony to be constantly striven for. This cosmic philosophy was not an esoteric idea reserved for philosophers. It was a practical guide for living that influenced every action, from the grandest state ritual to the most mundane daily chore. The primary purpose of human existence within this framework was to participate consciously in the flow of Teotl, to help maintain the delicate balance of the cosmos. This is the secret meaning behind the much misunderstood practice of sacrifice. It was not about appeasing angry gods, but about energy exchange. The Aztecs believed that the sun, the earth, and the rains expended their energy to sustain life. This energy, this Teotl, needed to be replenished. The most potent offering was human life because it contained the most vibrant spark of this sacred energy. Through ritual sacrifice, humanity was returning energy to the cosmos, recycling the divine force to keep the world in motion. It was a cosmic duty, a reciprocal relationship where humans actively sustained the universe that sustained them. This principle of balancing Teotl extended far beyond the sacrificial stone. It was woven into the very fabric of their art and architecture. The magnificent Templo Mayor was not just a place of worship, it was a colossal energy conductor. Its twin staircases represented the sacred mountains of Tenochtitlan, the sun god, and Tlaloc, the rain god, channeling their respective energies of fiery heat and life-giving water. The act of ascending these stairs during a ritual was a symbolic journey to the source of these powers. Similarly, the vibrant colors used in codices and featherwork were not arbitrary. The brilliant blue-green of turquoise was chosen specifically because it was the color of water and vitality, the most precious manifestation of Teotl. By creating art with these sacred hues, the artist was participating in the circulation of cosmic energy, making the divine present and tangible. Even daily life was a field for engaging with Teotl. A farmer planting seeds was not just growing food, he was aligning his actions with the creative, fertile aspect of the cosmic force. A weaver at her loom was intertwining threads in a pattern that mirrored the interconnected web of the universe. A mother sweeping her home was not merely cleaning, but ritually clearing away stagnant energy and creating a space for harmonious Teotl to flow. There was no separation between the spiritual and the physical, the sacred and the profane. Every action, no matter how small, had the potential to either contribute to cosmic balance or disrupt it. This world view fostered a profound sense of responsibility and connection. It taught that humanity was not a separate entity ruling over nature, but an integral part of a vast, energetic whole, with a vital role to play in its continuing existence. The secret of Teotl reveals the Aztecs not as superstitious barbarians, but as profound cosmologists who saw their entire civilization as a conscious participant in the sacred dynamics of the universe. From the abstract flow of cosmic energy, we now turn to a secret that is both dazzlingly beautiful and tragically tangible: the masterful skills of the Aztec goldsmiths. While countless golden objects were melted down into ingots by the Spanish, the true measure of this loss is not just in the weight of the metal, but in the breathtaking artistry that was obliterated. The secret techniques of these artisans, however, were not entirely lost. They were carefully recorded in codices like the Florentine and the Mendoza, which show us craftsmen at work in their workshops, preserving a visual record of a metallurgical tradition that rivaled any in the world. These illustrations reveal that the Aztecs were not merely miners of gold. They were alchemists of form, transforming raw ore into objects of divine splendor using methods that were centuries ahead of their time in the Americas. The most important of these techniques was the lost wax casting method, a complex process that allowed for the creation of intricate three-dimensional sculptures. The Codex illustrations, while not step-by-step technical manuals, show artisans working with materials that hint at this sophisticated practice. The process began not with metal but with beeswax. A master sculptor would carve the desired object, a detailed figurine of a god, an elaborate pendant, or a delicate ring, entirely out of wax. This wax model was then coated in a thick layer of clay, forming a mold. The entire assembly was then fired in a kiln. The heat would melt the wax, which would drain out through specially designed channels, leaving behind a perfect hollow cavity within the hardened clay. This is the lost wax that gives the method its name. Molten gold, heated in a crucible over a fierce charcoal fire, was then poured into this empty space, filling every minute detail of the original wax carving. Once the metal cooled and solidified, the clay mold was broken away, revealing a solid gold replica of the initial wax sculpture. This technique allowed for a level of detail that was impossible to achieve by hammering metal alone, producing works of stunning complexity and lifelike quality. Beyond casting, the codices hint at other advanced skills, such as the art of filigree and the creation of alloys. Filigree involves working with fine threads of metal, and Aztec artisans excelled at it. They would painstakingly draw out wires of gold and then solder them onto a base to create delicate, lace-like patterns resembling feathers, flowers, or geometric designs. They also understood the properties of different metals, creating alloys to achieve specific colors and strengths. By mixing gold with copper, they produced a rich, rose gold-like material called tembaga, which was harder and more durable than pure gold, yet could be polished to a brilliant, fiery luster. They also worked with silver and even practiced a form of electroplating, using a sour juice from local fruits to create a weak acidic solution that could deposit a thin layer of gold onto copper objects, giving them the appearance of solid gold at a fraction of the cost. These were not crude smiths, they were sophisticated metallurgists whose workshops were laboratories of innovation. The supreme value placed on this artistry is captured in one of history's most fateful encounters. When the first reports of strange, bearded men arriving on the coast reached Emperor Moctezuma II, he was filled with a sense of foreboding, perhaps seeing them as figures from the legend of Quetzalcoatl's return. In an attempt to appease these potential deities, he sent a series of lavish gifts to Hernán Cortés. The Spanish chronicles describe these gifts in awestruck detail. They were not simply raw materials or crude gold nuggets. They included a massive, two-wheeled gold disc representing the sun and an even larger silver disc representing the moon. There were gold collars intricate with tiny figures, bracelets adorned with jade and turquoise, and headdresses shimmering with quetzal feathers set in gold. Moctezuma was sending a message of immense power and sophistication, showcasing the pinnacle of his civilization's artistic achievement. He was offering treasures, believing that the magnificence of the workmanship would demonstrate his own divine authority and perhaps persuade the newcomers to treat him as an equal. This gesture, however, had the exact opposite effect. Where Moctezuma saw divine craftsmanship, Cortés and his men saw only the raw monetary value of the metal. The exquisite artistry that had taken generations to perfect was invisible to them. They saw only the weight of the gold. The gifts, intended as a display of power and culture, instead acted as the ultimate lure, confirming the Spaniards' wildest dreams of wealth and igniting an insatiable greed to find the source of these magnificent objects. The goldsmith's secret techniques, which should have been a testament to Aztec civilization, became the very thing that sealed its fate. The Spanish could not comprehend the skill required to create such wonders. They could only comprehend their value when melted down. In this tragic misunderstanding, we see the collision of two worldviews, one that valued art as an expression of the sacred and the power of the state, and another that valued precious metal solely as a commodity. The loss of these golden masterpieces is a profound cultural tragedy, but the codices ensure that the secret knowledge of the hands that made them has not been completely silenced. While the grandeur of temples and the discipline of armies defined the Aztec Empire's power, its true lifeblood flowed through a different kind of urban center, a marketplace of such staggering scale and organization that Spanish conquistadors claimed they could not keep track of all the goods on offer. This brings us to the 17th secret, the hidden economic engine of Tenochtitlan, a place preserved not in stone but in the pages of codices like the Florentine and the Matricula de Tributos. The great market of Tlatelolco, the sister city to Tenochtitlan, was more than just a place to buy food. It was a microcosm of the entire empire, a bustling, vibrant hub of commerce that reveals a society with a surprisingly sophisticated and capitalistic approach to trade. Imagine the sheer sensory overload of stepping into the Tlatelolco market on a major market day. The Florentine Codex, compiled by Bernardino de Sahagún with the help of indigenous elders, provides us with an almost cinematic account. The air would be thick with the smells of thousands of different items, the earthy scent of fresh tomatoes, chilies, and maize from the chinampas, the floating gardens, the pungent odor of fish and waterfowl from the lake, the rich aroma of cooked beans and tortilla as from food vendors, and the exotic perfume of copal incense and fragrant flowers. The sounds would be a deafening chorus of human activity, the calls of vendors advertising their wares, the haggling of customers, the chatter of porters carrying goods on their backs. The visual spectacle was even more astounding. Stalls were organized with meticulous precision by guild and product type. One entire section would be dedicated to foodstuffs, with mountains of red and green chilies, sacks of beans and salt, and baskets filled with a stunning variety of corn. Another section would feature live animals, turkeys, hairless dogs bred for eating, and even caged eagles. Then came the artisans, potters displaying fine painted ceramics, lapidaries polishing jade and obsidian, and feather workers creating intricate mosaics from the iridescent green feathers of the quetzal bird and the bright pink plumage of flamingos. The market was so vast that specialized goods had their own districts, including a section for luxury items like gold jewelry, elaborate cloaks, and even slaves, who were often prisoners of war sold by merchants. The sheer volume and variety of commerce required a sophisticated system to function smoothly, and the Aztecs had developed one that would be familiar to any modern economist. At the heart of this system was a standardized form of currency. While barter was common for everyday items, the Codex reveals that for larger or more valuable transactions, the Aztecs used a reliable medium of exchange, cacao beans. These small, bitter beans were not merely a food, they were money. Their value was stable because they were desirable, portable, and relatively difficult to counterfeit. The codices show that a small rabbit might cost 30 beans, while a slave could be purchased for 100 high-quality cacao beans. For even larger purchases, the Aztecs used standardized lengths of cotton cloth called quetzli as a higher denomination currency. This use of commodity money allowed for a complex economy to flourish, where prices could be compared, value could be stored, and long-distance trade could be conducted with a common measure of worth. The market was not a chaotic free-for-all. It was a regulated exchange with established prices and a clear understanding of value. Perhaps the most telling secret of the Tlatelolco market, and the clearest evidence of its advanced organization, was the presence of a formal legal and administrative oversight system. The Spanish chroniclers noted with amazement that the market was patrolled by officials who acted as market judges and inspectors. These were not mere security guards, they were government-appointed magistrates whose job was to ensure fair trade and resolve disputes. They would check the quality of goods, particularly food, to prevent spoilage or fraud. They verified the accuracy of measures, ensuring that a sack of maize was truly full and that a length of cloth was the correct size. If a vendor was caught using false measures or selling spoiled goods, The judges had the authority to impose immediate fines or even destroy the fraudulent merchandise in the public square as a deterrent to others. This system of commercial regulation created an environment of trust that was essential for the market to operate at such a massive scale. Both buyers and sellers could participate with confidence, knowing that a framework of rules protected their transactions. The marketplace was more than an economic necessity. It was a social and information hub that connected the empire. The long-distance merchants, the Pochteka, would return from their dangerous journeys to the distant lands of the Maya or the Huastec and display their exotic goods in a special section of the market. Here, one could find goods unavailable anywhere else in central Mexico: jade from Guatemala, tortoiseshell from the coasts, amber, and rare animal skins. These merchants were more than traders. They were the empire's eyes and ears, and the market was where they debriefed imperial officials, sharing intelligence about the political stability and military strength of distant regions. The market, therefore, was a central nervous system for the Aztec state, a place where goods, currency, and vital information circulated with an efficiency that stunned the Spanish. It reveals a civilization that understood the principles of capitalism, regulation, and global trade long before these concepts were formalized in Europe, proving that the secret to Aztec dominance was as much about economic genius as it was about military might. But beyond the bustling markets and the clamor of warfare, the Aztecs engaged in a ritual so profound that its court was considered a portal to the other world. Hidden within the depictions of a long, narrow alley with sloping walls and stone rings, found in codices and carved into the stones of ancient cities, lies the secret of the Mesoamerican ball game, or olla malistli. To the untrained eye, it might resemble a primitive team sport, but the codices reveal it was a deadly serious drama, a ritual reenactment of the most fundamental cosmic battles, where the fate of the very sun hung in the balance with every bounce of the ball. The game was played with a solid rubber ball, a substance so mysterious and prized that it seemed to possess a life of its own. This ball was far more than a piece of sporting equipment. It was a potent symbol. In the context of the game's sacred narrative, the ball represented nothing less than the sun itself on its perilous nightly journey through the dark underworld known as Mictlan. The court, or Tlachtli, was a symbolic representation of this dangerous realm, a liminal space between the world of the living and the dead. The action of keeping the heavy ball in motion, using only hips, thighs, and elbows, was a desperate struggle to ensure the sun's safe passage, to overcome the forces of darkness and guarantee its rebirth at dawn. A game that ended with the ball stalling was a bad omen, suggesting the sun might fail in its journey, while a dynamic, ongoing match symbolized the sun's victorious movement. To understand the full weight of this ritual, we must look to a foundational myth shared across Mesoamerica, most completely preserved in the Maya text, the Popol Vuh. The story of the hero twins Hunahpu and Xbalanque is the archetypal ball game saga. In the myth, the twin brothers are prodigious ball players whose noisy games anger the lords of the underworld. The lords summon the twins to Xibalba, the Maya underworld, to play a series of deceptive and deadly ball games. The twins ultimately outwit the death gods, sacrifice themselves, and are miraculously reborn, ascending to the sky to become the sun and the moon. This myth was the sacred script for the Aztec ball game. Each match was a reenactment of this primordial contest between life and death, order and chaos. The players were not merely athletes, they were stand-ins for the hero twins, and their opponents represented the lords of the underworld. The game was a physical prayer, a performance intended to ensure the cyclical rebirth of the cosmos by ritually replaying the victory of life over death. The stakes of this cosmic drama were unimaginably high, and the codices show that the outcome was a matter of religious and political destiny. While some games were likely played for recreation, the most significant matches, often held on important festival days, could conclude with a ritual offering far more valuable than a trophy. Historical accounts and codex imagery suggest that in certain circumstances, the captain of the losing team, or sometimes even the entire team, could be sacrificed. This was not seen as a punishment for poor performance, but as the ultimate culmination of the ritual. The sacrificed players became divine offerings, their lives given in a symbolic act that mirrored the hero twins' own journey through death and resurrection. Their blood was believed to nourish the sun, just as the ball's movement symbolized its journey, completing the sacred cycle and strengthening the cosmic order. The playing field was in essence an extension of the temple pyramid. The game's influence extended far beyond the court's stone walls, deeply embedded in the political and social fabric of the empire. Rival city-states would sometimes settle territorial disputes or political tensions not through all-out war, but through a highly charged ritual bowl game. The outcome was believed to reflect the will of the gods, providing a divine mandate for the victor. For the spectators, witnessing a game was a communal religious experience, a collective participation in the maintenance of the universe. The sound of the heavy rubber ball striking the players' padded hips echoed the thunder of cosmic forces in conflict. Every dramatic ricochet off the sloping walls was a moment of tension, a visual representation of the sun's precarious path. The ball game was a secret theater where every citizen could witness the foundational drama of their existence, a constant reminder that their world's survival depended on a fragile balance maintained through skill, ritual, and the ultimate sacrifice. Now we approach one of the most pivotal and enigmatic secrets preserved in the ancient books, a belief that would ultimately shape the very course of history during the Spanish conquest. Across numerous codices, from the pre-Hispanic pages of the Borgia group to the colonial-era Florentine Codex, one deity appears with a consistency and complexity that sets him apart: Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent. His worship was not a simple, unified cult, but a deep and often secret undercurrent of thought that presented a profound alternative to the dominant state religion centered on war and sun sacrifice. To understand Quetzalcoatl is to uncover a hidden strand of Aztec philosophy that prized knowledge over brute force, and whose final, tragic secret would be exploited by the conquerors. The very image of Quetzalcoatl is a masterpiece of symbolic fusion, a secret code in visual form. He is depicted as a serpent, a creature of the earth representing wisdom, fertility, and the physical world, but adorned with the lavish, green feathers of the resplendent Quetzal bird, a being of the sky symbolizing spirit, freedom, and the heavens. This combination is not a monstrous hybrid, but a deliberate representation of harmony. Quetzalcoatl embodies the sacred union of earth and sky, matter and spirit. He is the god of wind, the breath of life that animates all things. He is the patron of priests, the inventor of writing and the calendar, and the god who gave humanity maize, the staple of life. In the Codex Borbonicus, he is shown as a bearded, benevolent figure, often contrasted with the more fearsome visages of Tezcatlipoca, the smoking mirror god of destiny and conflict, or Huitzilopochtli, the relentless sun god of war. This duality placed Quetzalcoatl at the heart of a theological tension, representing a path of civilization, learning, and peaceful sustenance that stood in opposition to the bloody demands of the cosmic status quo. This philosophical divide is crystallized in a powerful myth preserved in the Codices, a secret story of a golden age and a tragic fall. The legend tells of a time when Quetzalcoatl, under his title of Topiltzin Quetzalcoatl, ruled as a priest-king over the fabled city of Tolan. His reign was a paradise of abundance and virtue, where corn grew in such size that a single ear was too heavy for a man to carry, and cotton grew in natural hues of brilliant colors. There was no need for human sacrifice, as Quetzalcoatl offered only serpents, butterflies, and jade. This era represents an idealized past, a secret longing for a world governed by wisdom and creativity rather than war. However, this utopia was shattered by the machinations of Tezcatlipoca, who, through trickery and deceit, corrupted Topiltzin Quetzalcoatl, forcing him into drunkenness and dishonor. Ashamed, the feathered serpent king was compelled to abandon his throne and his city. The codices depict his departure to the east, where, according to the most crucial part of the prophecy, he set himself aflame and ascended to become the morning star Venus. But before vanishing, he made a solemn promise that he would return one day in a one-reed year to reclaim his kingdom and restore its former glory. This prophecy of return was not a minor folktale. It was a deeply embedded secret within the Aztec cyclical view of time, a belief that history repeats itself. The year one reed, or Cattle in Nahuatl, was a recurring date in their calendar, a time portended for great change. For the Aztec emperors who derived their legitimacy from the warlike Huitzilopochtli, the prophecy of Quetzalcoatl's return was a latent threat, a potential challenge to their entire theological and political order. It was a secret anxiety, a whispered doubt about the bloody path their empire had taken. When strange reports began to arrive at Moctezuma II's court in the year one reed of 1519, describing pale, bearded men arriving on giant floating houses from the exact eastern direction from which Quetzalcoatl had departed, this secret anxiety erupted into a full-blown crisis of belief. The signs seemed to align with terrifying precision. Moctezuma, a deeply religious man and a skilled astrologer, was paralyzed by this possibility. The Florentine Codex, compiled from the memories of indigenous nobles who witnessed these events, captures his profound uncertainty. He sent emissaries to the coast with the regalia of different gods to test Cortes. Was this stranger Quetzalcoatl? The gifts he sent were not merely tributes, they were diagnostic tools. He sent the finery of Tezcatlipoca and of Tlaloc, but most significantly, he sent the attire of Quetzalcoatl himself, a feathered serpent mask, a turquoise mosaic shield, and other sacred items. Cortes, of course, had no understanding of this symbolic language. He saw only riches, but for Moctezuma and his advisors, the Spaniards' acceptance of these gifts and his seemingly divine appearance created a fatal hesitation. This initial interpretation of the Spanish as divine beings, fueled by the secret prophecy, prevented an immediate, overwhelming military response. It allowed Cortes to land, to gather allies among the Aztecs' many enemies, and to march inland under a cloak of perceived divinity. The secret worship of Quetzalcoatl, a tradition that offered an alternative to violence, was tragically twisted into the very weapon that enabled the empire's destruction. It was a catastrophic case of historical misunderstanding, where a prophecy of hope and renewal became the gateway for conquest, proving that the most powerful secrets are not always those of strength, but sometimes those of a different, more vulnerable vision for the world. While the ballgame court and the royal palace were centers of immense symbolic power, the true foundation of Aztec social order for the common person was found in a far more mundane, yet equally revolutionary institution, the court of law. The 20th secret we uncover from the codices reveals that the empire's stability was not solely maintained by the threat of the army, but by a sophisticated and surprisingly accessible legal system. The Aztecs governed themselves through a detailed code of laws that touched every aspect of life, from land disputes and inheritance to public drunkenness and theft. This was a society that believed order was a conscious construction, achieved through the consistent and public application of justice, a principle that allowed a city of over 200,000 people to function with remarkable harmony. At the heart of this system was a hierarchy of courts and a professional class of judges, known as Tlatoani in the higher ranks. The Codex Mendoza and the Florentine Codex provide glimpses into this judicial structure. At the local level, each neighborhood or calpulli had its own court where elders would settle minor disputes between residents. For more serious matters, or if a party was unsatisfied with a local ruling, they could appeal to a central court in the main temple precinct of Tenochtitlan. Here, professional judges, appointed by the emperor himself for their wisdom and integrity, would hear cases. These were not amateurs. They were expected to have extensive knowledge of the complex oral legal codes and to adjudicate with impartiality. The proceedings were public, fostering transparency, and both the accuser and the accused were given the opportunity to present their evidence and call witnesses. The system even had a form of legal aid, as poor individuals could request the assistance of a professional speaker to help them plead their case. This structure ensured that justice, at least in theory, was not a privilege reserved for the elite but a right accessible to every citizen. The laws themselves were numerous and specific, designed to create a predictable and orderly society. The codes regarding property were particularly detailed. Land was the foundation of wealth, and its ownership was carefully recorded. The Codex Santa Maria Asuncion, for example, is essentially a land registry, using glyphs to depict individual plots, their boundaries, and the names of their owners. Theft was treated as a serious offense, but the punishment was nuanced and considered the circumstances. A commoner caught stealing maize from a field during a famine might receive a comparatively light punishment, as the act was driven by need. However, a theft from a royal storehouse or a temple was a capital crime, punishable by death, as it was seen as an offense against the state and the gods. This gradation of punishment shows a legal system that attempted to balance the letter of the law with an understanding of human motivation. Perhaps the most striking aspect of Aztec law was its distinct approach to social class. The empire was highly stratified, and the legal code reflected this reality in a way that seems harsh to modern sensibilities, but was intended to maintain the social fabric. The principle was simple: greater privilege came with greater responsibility and harsher consequences for wrongdoing. A nobleman who committed a crime like theft or assault would almost certainly face a more severe punishment than a commoner for the same offense. The reasoning was that a member of the elite who had benefited from education and privilege was held to a higher standard of conduct. His actions were expected to exemplify the virtues of the state. Conversely, a commoner who showed exceptional bravery in battle could be elevated in status, and his children might gain access to the noble schools. The law was a tool for enforcing social roles, but it also contained a mechanism for rewarding merit, creating a dynamic, if unequal, system. Public conduct was rigorously policed to prevent the disorder that could anger the gods. Laws against public drunkenness are a fascinating example. For the Aztec elite, the fermented sap of the megi plant, known as pulque, was a sacred beverage consumed in carefully controlled rituals. However, for the common populace, public intoxication was strictly forbidden. The Florentine Codex explains that except for the elderly who were permitted to drink, a commoner caught drunk in public would have his head shaved as a mark of shame for a first offense. A second offense could lead to a beating or the destruction of his home. A third conviction was punishable by death. This severe escalation was not about puritanical morality, it was about social control. A drunkard was seen as lazy, disruptive, and most dangerously neglectful of his duties to his family and his community. In a society where every individual had a role to play in maintaining cosmic balance, such negligence could not be tolerated. The ultimate secret to the system's effectiveness, however, was its terrifying consistency and the finality of its punishments. There were no prisons as we know them. Punishments were swift and public, designed to serve as a stark lesson to the entire community. For capital crimes like murder, treason, or serious corruption by officials, the sentence was typically death, often by sacrifice at the temple. This was not just an execution, it was a communal ritual that transformed a criminal's death into a contribution to the cosmic order, a final payment of their debt to society and the gods. For lesser crimes, punishments included enslavement, restitution payments, or corporal punishment like beatings. The sheer public nature of justice, from the open-air courts to the visible consequences, created a powerful deterrent. Everyone knew the rules and everyone knew the price of breaking them. This codified rule of law, with its appointed judges, detailed statutes, and unwavering enforcement, was the true secret to the Aztec Empire's internal stability. It proved that their genius lay not only in conquering others, but in governing themselves with a structured rigor that commanded respect and ensured order long after the battles were won. We often picture the Aztec diet as a simple, monotonous fare of maize and beans, a subsistence-level existence for a mighty empire. But the Codices unveil a far more astonishing reality, a culinary world of incredible biodiversity and sophisticated nutrition that would be the envy of any modern society. The Florentine Codex, in particular, acts as a sprawling cookbook and ecological survey, cataloging hundreds of edible plants, animals, and insects that sustained a population of millions with a resilience that European diets of the time simply could not match. The secret to their health and the sheer scale of their urban centers lay not in a single staple, but in this remarkable diversity, a conscious and masterful utilization of their entire environment. At the foundation was, of course, maize or century, but to view it as mere corn is to miss the technological marvel it represented. The Aztecs developed a process called nixtamalization, where dried maize kernels were soaked and cooked in an alkaline solution, often made from slaked lime or wood ash. This ingenious technique, illustrated in the codices showing women grinding corn on stone slabs called metates, did more than just soften the kernels for grinding into dough or masa. It unlocked essential niacin, making the vitamin available for the body to prevent deficiency diseases like pellagra. It also significantly increased the availability of protein and calcium, transforming maize from a simple carbohydrate into a complete nutritional foundation. From this masa, they created the ubiquitous tortilla, the versatile tlaxcali, which served as their edible spoon, plate, and bread all in one. They made tamales steamed in corn husks and a thick, nutritious gruel called atole, often flavored with chili, honey, or vanilla. Maize was more than food. It was a sacred substance, the very flesh of humanity according to their creation myths, and they treated it with a technological and spiritual reverence that maximized its life-sustaining power. Yet, to focus only on the field is to ignore the lake itself. The Valley of Mexico was a vast aquatic ecosystem, and the Aztecs exploited it with breathtaking efficiency. While the Spanish described Lake Texcoco as brackish and unappealing, the Aztecs harvested a secret superfood from its waters, spirulina algae, which they called tecuitlatl. They would skim the greenish scum from the lake's surface, form it into cakes, and dry them in the sun. These cakes were a powerhouse of nutrition, packed with protein, iron, and vitamins, providing a crucial dietary supplement, especially for those who had limited access to meat. The lake also teemed with aquatic life. The codices depict fishermen netting small fish, harvesting shrimp, and collecting insect eggs called ahuatl, a caviar-like delicacy rich in protein. They even domesticated a specific breed of hairless dog, the Xoloitzcuintli, raised for its meat, and another edible animal, the turkey, or huxolotl, which was far more common in their diet than the wild game reserved for the nobility. This reliance on aquatic and domesticated sources created a stable and resilient food web that was insulated from the failures of any single crop. Perhaps the most surprising aspect of their diet, hidden in the pages of the codices, is the vast entomophagy or insect consumption. The Aztecs were master foragers of the miniature world, turning what other cultures might consider pests into prized sources of protein and flavor. The most famous example is the chapulin, or grasshopper, which was collected in great quantities, toasted on clay comals, and seasoned with chili and lime, making them a crunchy, nutritious snack that remains popular in Mexico today. But their insect palate was incredibly diverse. They harvested the eggs of a water bug called an axayacatl to create a dish known as ahuatl, often described as Mexican caviar. They ate maguey worms, which infest the agave plant, and winged ants, considered a seasonal treat. The Florentine Codex describes and illustrates this incredible variety, showing that insects were not a food of last resort but a regular and valued part of the common person's diet, providing essential fats, proteins, and minerals that were difficult to obtain elsewhere. Beyond the lake and the insect world, the Aztecs cultivated and foraged an astonishing array of fruits and vegetables that were completely unknown in Europe. Their markets, as described in the Codices, would have been a bewildering spectacle of unfamiliar produce. There were tomatoes of every size and color, from small green tomatillos enveloped in a papery husk to large red varieties. They enjoyed a tremendous diversity of squashes and pumpkins, eating both the flesh and the nutritious seeds, which they roasted and salted. Avocados or ahuacatl were a beloved and fatty fruit. They cultivated chilies from the mild poblano to the intensely spicy habanero, using them not just for heat but as a primary source of vitamin C. They harvested prickly pears, the fruit of the nopal cactus, and the sweet, fragrant pods of the vanilla orchid. This incredible botanical knowledge meant their diet was rich in vitamins, antioxidants, and fiber, contributing to strong immune systems and overall health that allowed them to thrive in a crowded urban environment. The Aztec diet was a secret masterpiece of ecological integration, a testament to a civilization that did not simply live on the land, but lived with it, drawing sustenance from every level of its complex and vibrant ecosystem. To truly grasp the scale of Aztec engineering, we must first erase our modern image of a city built on solid ground and instead envision Tenochtitlan as it truly was, a metropolis engineered to float. Nestled in the heart of a lake system where fresh water from the surrounding mountains mingled with the salty waters of Lake Texcoco, the Aztecs faced a constant environmental challenge. A less ingenious people might have succumbed to flooding, saline poisoning of their crops, or a crippling lack of drinking water. Instead, they responded with a breathtaking series of hydraulic projects that transformed a seemingly hostile environment into their greatest strategic asset. The codices, particularly maps like the one in the Codex Mendoza, hold the key to understanding this secret. They don't show blueprints in our sense, but their symbolic depictions of causeways, aqueducts, and grid-like garden plots are a masterclass in urban planning, revealing a civilization that thought like a nation of civil engineers. The most urgent problem was securing a reliable supply of fresh water for a population that may have exceeded 200,000 people. The water in the immediate vicinity of the island city was brackish and undrinkable. Their solution was the construction of a dual-channel aqueduct, an engineering marvel that ran for several miles from the springs at the hill of Chapultepec on the western shore. The genius of this design, hinted at in Codex illustrations of parallel lines leading to the city, was its practicality. The aqueduct was not a single pipe but two separate clay channels. While one channel was in active use, supplying the city with a constant flow of fresh water, the other could be taken offline for maintenance and cleaning, ensuring an uninterrupted supply. This aqueduct, supported by a massive masonry causeway, did more than just quench thirst. It fed public fountains throughout the city and supplied the homes of the nobility, but its most critical function was likely supporting the vast network of Chinampa agriculture that fed the populace. This was not merely a construction project, it was the city's literal lifeline, a testament to their understanding of hygiene and urban logistics. Controlling the quality of water around the city itself was an equally formidable task. The Valley of Mexico's lakes existed in a delicate balance, and seasonal floods or storm surges could push the saline waters of Lake Texcoco into the fresher waters surrounding Tenochtitlan, threatening the delicate root systems of their crops and their source of drinking water. The Aztec response was a monumental feat of hydraulic engineering, the Great Dike of Nezahualcoyotl. Named for the famed poet king of Texcoco who designed it, this dike was a massive barrier over 10 miles long, constructed of stones, wooden stakes, and earth. It ran across the lake, effectively separating the fresh waters to the west from the salty waters to the east. The Codex maps with their stark divisions of the lake likely symbolize this very structure. The dike was not a solid wall. It incorporated sluice gates that could be opened or closed to manage water levels, preventing flooding during the rainy season and allowing for some controlled mixing when necessary. This project demonstrates a profound ecological understanding. The Aztecs weren't just fighting against their environment. They were actively managing it on a massive scale to create a stable and productive habitat. The most iconic and productive application of this hydraulic control was the invention of the chinampas, the so-called floating gardens that formed the agricultural heart of the empire. To the Spanish, these plots of land, rising like lush green islands from the lake, seemed to magically float. In reality, they were a brilliantly simple and efficient form of reclamation and intensive agriculture. The process began by staking out a rectangular plot in the shallow lake bed with wooden posts. These frames were then filled in with layers of mud dredged from the lake bottom, along with decaying vegetation and other organic matter. The resulting plot was a nutrient-rich, raised bed permanently irrigated by the capillary action of the water soaking up from below. Willow trees were planted around the edges, their roots binding the structure firmly to the lake bed and preventing erosion. Each chinampa was a self-fertilizing system, with farmers enriching the soil by scooping up the mineral-rich muck from the canals between them. The productivity of this system was staggering. The chinampas were not seasonal farms. They could be cultivated year-round, allowing for as many as 7 harvests annually for some crops. They produced the mountains of maize, beans, squashes, chilies, and flowers that filled the markets of Tlatelolco. This agricultural abundance was the true foundation of Aztec wealth and power. A densely populated city like Tenochtitlan could not have existed without a highly efficient food production system located right at its doorstep, eliminating the need for long-distance transport of bulky foodstuffs. The chinampas turned the Aztecs' lacustrine location from a potential weakness into an overwhelming strength, creating a sustainable, hyper-local food source that could support imperial expansion. The canals between the chinampas also served as transportation routes, allowing farmers to easily move their goods to the city's markets by canoe. This seamless integration of agriculture, transportation, and water management reveals a holistic approach to urban design that was centuries ahead of its time. The secret to the Aztec Empire's might was not just found on the battlefield, but in the quiet, fertile waters of these magnificent floating gardens, a testament to the engineering genius that could make a lake bloom. Moving from the silent, floating world of the chinampas, we now enter a realm of sacred sound, a dimension of Aztec life that was every bit as vital as food and water. If we could travel back in time to the peak of the empire, the first thing to strike us would not be the sight of the towering pyramids, but the overwhelming soundscape that emanated from them. This was not a city filled with the random noise of daily life. It was a place meticulously orchestrated by a secret symphony, a complex language of rhythm and melody designed for one audience alone, the gods. The codices, particularly the Florentine Codex and the illustrations within the Codex Borbonicus, provide us with a vivid visual score for this lost music, depicting a stunning array of instruments and the intense, focused musicians who played them. To understand these images is to unlock the secret that for the Aztecs, music was not a form of entertainment. It was a form of prayer, a sonic offering as essential as blood itself in maintaining the cosmic order. The instruments themselves were crafted from the very elements of the Aztec world, each material chosen for its symbolic power and sonic properties. The most commanding of these was the conch shell trumpet, or eitkakali. When a priest blew into this massive, spiraling shell, it did not produce a melodic tune but a deep, mournful, and far-carrying blare that could be heard across the entire city. This sound was the voice of the sea god Tlaloc, summoned to the highland capital. It was the sound that announced the beginning of the most solemn ceremonies, a call that signaled to the populace that the boundary between the human and divine realms was about to be pierced. Alongside the conch shell stood the upright drum, the huhutel. This was the heart of the ritual orchestra. A hollowed-out log stood on legs with a drumhead made of jaguar skin. The jaguar, as the lord of the night and the underworld, lent its potent essence to the instrument. When the drummer struck the huhutel with his hands, the resulting boom was not just a beat, it was the pulse of the earth, the rhythmic foundation upon which the entire ritual was built. Its deeper, more resonant counterpart was the horizontal drum, the teponaztli, a hollowed log with two tongues carved into its top that produced two distinct tones when struck with rubber-tipped mallets. The interplay between the deep thump of the huhutel and the melodic, wooden tones of the teponaztli created a complex polyrhythmic bass that guided the movements of dancers and priests. For higher, more piercing sounds, the Aztecs used a variety of innovative instruments. Raspers or omichikahuaztli were made from notched human or animal bones. When a stick or another bone was scraped along these notches, it produced a dry, rattling sound that was believed to mimic the voices of the ancestors or the chattering of skeletal spirits from the underworld. This eerie noise was essential in rituals honoring the dead or the gods of death. Then there were the wind instruments, which provided the melodic voice of the symphony. Ocarinas, crafted from clay and shaped like animals or gods, could produce a series of haunting, flute-like notes. Whistles were often made to look like skulls, and when blown, they emitted a high-pitched, shrieking sound that was used to create a sense of terror and awe during sacrificial ceremonies. The most majestic of the wind instruments was a long, multi-piped flute, sometimes made of clay but also crafted from the bones of large birds or even humans, allowing a single musician to play several notes in harmony. The combined effect of these instruments, the booming drums, the blaring conch, the rattling bones, and the whistling flutes, was a soundscape designed to overwhelm the senses, to transport both the participants and the deities into a shared, trance-like state. The purpose of this powerful music was singular and profound. It was a direct channel of communication with the gods. Each ritual, each festival in the 18-month ceremonial calendar had its own specific musical repertoire. The rhythms and melodies were not composed for artistic expression but were divinely prescribed, believed to have been given to humanity by the gods themselves. The music served as a metaphysical engine for the ritual. During a ceremony of human sacrifice, for example, the tempo of the drums would steadily increase, building a crescendo of tension that mirrored the rising anticipation of the climactic moment. The pounding rhythm was not meant to drown out the ceremony but to energize it, to send waves of sacred sound upward to nourish the deities. It was believed that the gods craved not just the visual spectacle of the ritual and the scent of burning copal incense, but also the sound of the music. The melodies were offerings of beauty, and the rhythms were offerings of energy, a vital force that helped sustain the cosmos. This sacred soundscape was inseparable from the art of dance. The codices show lines of dancers moving with precise, synchronized steps, their bodies adorned with bells and rattles made of shells and copper that added another layer of percussion to the orchestra. The dancers were not performers for an audience. They were active participants in the ritual, their movements a physical manifestation of the music and the myths it represented. A dance might tell the story of the gods' battles, the changing of the seasons, or the journey of the sun. The musicians and the dancers worked in perfect harmony, creating a total sensory experience designed to make the divine present and tangible. To be in the great ceremonial plaza during a major festival was to be immersed in a living, breathing prayer, where every drumbeat was a heartbeat offered to the gods, and every blast of the conch shell was a call that echoed from the depths of the lake to the heights of the heavens. The secret of Aztec music reveals a civilization that understood the power of sound to shape reality, to bridge worlds, and to participate actively in the eternal, rhythmic dance of creation. Beyond the grand orchestrations of state ritual and the precise calculations of the calendar, the Aztecs cultivated a secret ideal of personal character that was considered the highest mark of a truly realized human being. This concept, beautifully expressed in the Nahuatl phrase in Ixtli, in Yolotl, which translates to the face, the heart, is a philosophical gem hidden within the poetic passages of the Florentine Codex and the depictions of wise elders in other historical manuscripts. At first glance, it might sound like a simple call for integrity, but its true meaning is far more profound. For the Aztecs, a person's physical face was not just a set of features. It was the outward manifestation of their acquired wisdom, their life experience, and their social persona, the mask they presented to the world. The heart, or Yolotl, was not merely the seat of emotion, but the core of one's will, vitality, and enduring spirit. The ultimate human achievement was to forge a face of profound wisdom and pair it with a heart of unwavering will, creating a person of complete and balanced character. This ideal was the secret foundation of the entire Aztec education system, both in the austere Comicac for the nobility and the disciplined Tulpochcali for commoners. The goal was not simply to create obedient citizens or skilled warriors, but to mold individuals who embodied this essential balance. The face of wisdom was cultivated through the rigorous intellectual and artistic curriculum. Students memorized the sacred hymns, learned to read the complex glyphs of the codices, and studied the movements of the stars and the deep cycles of the calendar. This knowledge was not collected for its own sake. It was intended to shape their perception, to give them a wise face with which to perceive the world correctly and act within it appropriately. They were taught rhetoric and law so that their speech would be measured and true, a reflection of an ordered mind. Simultaneously, the heart of will was forged through physical and spiritual discipline. The pre-dawn icy baths, the prolonged fasts, the self-sacrifice of bloodletting, these were not punishments. They were exercises in endurance designed to temper the spirit, to create a heart that was firm, resilient, and capable of withstanding fear, pain, and temptation. A wise face without a firm heart was seen as weak and ineffectual. A strong heart without a wise face was considered brutish and dangerous. True power lay in their union. In the realm of leadership and statecraft, in Ixtli, in Yolotl was the secret standard against which every ruler and official was measured. The great Tlatoni, or speaker, was expected to be the living embodiment of this ideal. His face needed to be a mirror of the state's accumulated knowledge. During council meetings, as depicted in the Codices, he was not to speak first or impulsively. He was to listen carefully to the advice of his seasoned counselors, absorbing their wisdom until his own face could reflect a considered and enlightened judgment. This wisdom, however, had to be backed by the heart of decisive action. When the time came to make a fateful decision, to send an army to war, to authorize a major construction project, or to administer justice, his Yolotl had to be firm. He could not vacillate or be swayed by fleeting emotions. The concept demanded a leader who was both thoughtful and resolute, who could weigh complex information with a sage's patience and then act with a warrior's conviction. This balance prevented rulers from being either indecisive philosophers or reckless tyrants. On a deeply personal level, this philosophy provided a framework for everyday moral conduct and self-reflection. The Aztecs believed that individuals were not born with a fixed character. They were tasked with creating it throughout their lives, much like a sculptor gradually revealing a form from stone. To have a face meant to be authentic and consistent, one's public actions and private thoughts should align, creating a persona of integrity that others could trust. Deceit, hypocrisy, and gossip were seen as diseases of the face, creating a distorted and untrustworthy visage. The heart referred to one's moral compass and emotional fortitude. It was the inner strength required to be truthful even when it was difficult, to show compassion to those in need, and to fulfill one's duties to family and community without complaint. The Florentine Codex is filled with exhortations from elders to the youth, urging them to strengthen both aspects. A parent might advise a child to make your face wise, make your heart firm, encouraging them to seek knowledge while also developing the courage to act rightly upon it. This was not about achieving perfection, but about engaging in a continuous, lifelong process of self-cultivation. The enduring power of Inyolotl as a secret of Aztec thought is that it presents a vision of humanity that is both demanding and deeply humane. It acknowledges the complexity of human nature, recognizing that we contain both the capacity for brilliant reason and the potential for raw, untamed passion. The ideal does not ask us to suppress one in favor of the other, but to harmonize them. It suggests that the highest form of strength is not domination over others, but mastery over oneself, the ability to temper passion with wisdom and to animate knowledge with decisive action. In a civilization often remembered for its outward ferocity, this inner philosophical secret reveals a profound introspective depth, a belief that the greatest conquest was not of land but of one's own character. It was a guiding star for personal behavior, a blueprint for righteous leadership, and a timeless reminder that true virtue lies in the delicate, powerful balance between what we know and the strength we have to live by it. Yet beyond the carefully regulated markets of Tlatelolco, the Aztecs wove a far more expansive and secret web of economic influence that stretched across the known world. The tribute lists we've seen were the formal, mandatory payments of a conquered empire, but a parallel system of voluntary, long-distance trade operated in the shadows, a network so vital to the state that its members were considered a noble class. This brings us to our 25th secret, the intricate world of the Pochteca, a guild of merchant spies whose covert journeys and diplomatic cunning were as crucial to Aztec power as any army. The codices, particularly the maps within the Codex Mendoza and the Fejaveri Maya, provide a cryptic atlas of these routes, showing not just the flow of goods, but the silent flow of information that held the empire together. The Pochteca were no ordinary peddlers. They were a hereditary guild, living in their own designated districts within cities like Tenochtitlan and Tlatelolco, governed by their own strict laws and worshipping their own patron god, Yaxcoatl, the Lord of the Vanguard. Their status was unique. They were commoners who, through their wealth and service, could achieve privileges and honors typically reserved for the nobility. Yet they were expected to live with extreme modesty in public to avoid arousing envy or suspicion. Their true power lay in their dual role. Officially, they were long-distance traders undertaking journeys that could last years, venturing hundreds of miles into lands far beyond Aztec control. But unofficially, they were the eyes and ears of the state. As they traveled, they meticulously observed everything: the military strength of potential rivals, the political stability of independent kingdoms, the layout of cities, and the location of valuable resources. Upon their return, they would deliver detailed reports directly to the emperor's chief advisors, their intelligence often determining whether the next imperial campaign would be one of trade or one of conquest. The trade routes they navigated were arteries of commerce and culture that connected ecosystems and civilizations. The Codex Mendoza maps these routes as lines connecting glyphs of different cities, creating a sprawling network that ran from the arid deserts of the north to the lush rainforests of the south. From the north, the Pochteca brought back a commodity more precious than gold to the Aztecs: turquoise. Mined in what is now the American Southwest, this brilliant blue-green stone was the color of life and royalty, essential for the mosaic masks of gods and emperors. They also traded for the bright red feathers of the scarlet macaw, symbols of tropical splendor. Journeying south into the lands of the Maya and beyond, they sought the iridescent green tail feathers of the Quetzal bird, each one a treasure used in the magnificent headdresses of the elite. But perhaps the most important cargo was the cacao bean. In these southern regions, cacao was abundant, and the Pochteca would transport vast quantities back to the Central Highlands, where it served as the primary currency of the empire. This exchange transformed simple trade into a strategic necessity, controlling the very monetary system upon which the Aztec economy depended. The true genius of this system was its diplomatic flexibility. The Pochteca were masters of soft power. When entering the territory of an independent or potentially hostile state, they did not arrive as conquerors but as respectful merchants, bearing gifts of exotic goods from the Aztec heartland. They would establish trading relationships, building trust and creating economic dependencies. A ruler who grew accustomed to receiving fine Aztec obsidian blades, jade jewelry, or rich textiles might be less inclined to resist imperial overtures. In this way, the Pochteca often achieved through negotiation and economic influence what would have required a costly military campaign. They were the empire's first line of foreign policy, gauging the temper of distant peoples and sometimes paving the way for peaceful incorporation into the Aztec sphere. However, this work was incredibly dangerous. Traveling through treacherous terrain and unfamiliar territories, they faced bandits, rival traders, and communities deeply suspicious of outsiders. Their caravans were heavily guarded, and they moved with a secrecy that was essential for their survival. The legacy of the Pochteca reveals a final, profound secret about the nature of the Aztec Empire. It was not a monolithic block of territory under uniform military control. Instead, it was a dynamic and flexible hegemony, with a core of directly ruled provinces surrounded by a periphery of independent but economically influenced states. The Pochteca were the threads that stitched this complex patchwork together. Their trade routes were not just paths for commerce, they were channels for the flow of ideas, artistic styles, and religious concepts, creating a shared cultural sphere across Mesoamerica. The empire's strength, therefore, lay as much in the silent, calculated journeys of its merchant spies as in the public marches of its armies. They provided the strategic intelligence that allowed for precise military action, the economic goods that fueled the state's wealth, and the diplomatic connections that extended its influence far beyond the reach of its swords. While the Aztecs devoted immense energy to the rituals of life, they held an equally complex and secret understanding of what awaited the soul after its earthly journey. The Spanish conquistadors, with their binary view of a single heaven and hell, completely misread the vibrant funerary scenes depicted in codices like the Borgia and the Vaticanus A. They saw only pagan superstition, but these images are actually intricate maps of the afterlife, revealing a cosmology where death was not an end, but a transition to one of several distinct realms. The ultimate secret hidden in these pages is that the Aztecs believed your eternal destiny was not determined by how virtuously you lived, but by the specific way you died. This created a fascinating spiritual logic that intimately linked the circumstances of one's death to their posthumous journey. The most honored path was reserved for two seemingly opposite groups, warriors who fell in battle and women who died during childbirth. At first glance, this pairing appears paradoxical, but to the Aztec mind, both were considered forms of sacred combat. A warrior captured or killed on the battlefield was seen as making the ultimate offering, his blood becoming the divine sustenance for the sun. His reward was to join the celestial army of the sun god Tenochtitlan. The codices depict these souls as vibrant companions to the sun, accompanying it on its glorious ascent to the zenith each morning. After 4 years of this celestial service, their souls would transform into beautiful hummingbirds and butterflies, creatures that flitted among the flowers in a blissful paradise. For women who died bringing new life into the world, their death was viewed with equal honor. They were esteemed as warriors themselves, having battled to deliver a new soldier for the sun or a future mother for the people. These women were deified as Cihuatateo, divine women, and their destiny was to carry the sun on its perilous journey through the underworld each afternoon, from its zenith to its setting in the west. A completely different fate awaited those who succumbed to the power of water, a destiny governed by the rain god Tlaloc. The codices show a verdant paradise called Tlalocan, a place of eternal spring and abundance where maize, squash, and flowers grew in perpetual perfection. Access to this realm was granted not by moral purity, but by the nature of one's death. Those who died from water-related causes, drowning, being struck by lightning, or diseases like dropsy which caused the body to swell with fluid, were believed to be chosen by Tlaloc himself. Their bodies were not cremated like warriors, but buried with a digging stick, symbolizing their new role as agricultural spirits in this watery heaven. Tlaloccan was not a place of ethereal spiritual bliss, but a very tangible, earthly paradise where the soul continued a life of fertile productivity, reflecting the Aztec reverence for the life-giving yet dangerous power of rain. For the vast majority of people, however, death came from old age, common illness, or any cause not deemed spectacular enough for a special paradise. Their souls faced the most common and arduous journey, a descent into the cold, shadowy depths of Mictlan, the underworld. This was not a place of punishment for sinners, but a final destination for ordinary souls, a 9-level subterranean realm ruled by the skeletal lord and lady of death, Mictlantecutli and Mictlantecuhtli. The journey through these 9 layers was a grueling 4-year ordeal filled with terrifying challenges. The codices illustrate the soul navigating desolate landscapes, crossing a river with the aid of a small yellow dog, passing between clashing mountains, and enduring an icy wind bristling with obsidian blades. This journey was a process of gradual dissolution, where the soul slowly shed its earthly attachments until it reached the final layer and found complete oblivion, a quiet end to its existence. The elaborate funerary rites performed for the dead, such as placing a jade stone in their mouth as spiritual sustenance, were designed to provide essential supplies for this long and difficult voyage. This multifaceted view of the afterlife was a secret masterstroke of social and spiritual engineering, by offering glorious destinies for deaths that served the state, the soldier, and the childbearing mother. The empire incentivized behaviors crucial to its survival and expansion. It transformed the fear of death into a motivation for supreme sacrifice, simultaneously by providing a specific, honorable paradise for those chosen by Tlaloc. It integrated the ever-present dangers of the natural world into a coherent spiritual framework, offering comfort to those afflicted by forces beyond their control. And for the common person, the difficult but ultimately peaceful oblivion of Mictlan provided a straightforward, egalitarian end. This complex cosmology reveals a civilization that sought to find meaning and purpose in every type of death, weaving the ultimate human mystery into the very fabric of its societal and cosmic order. This exploration of the afterlife reveals a civilization deeply concerned with the soul's journey. But to understand how the Aztecs communicated with the divine realms they so meticulously mapped, we must uncover a practice that modern science is only beginning to comprehend. Tucked away in the vibrant pages of codices like the Borgia and the Florentine is evidence of a secret, sacramental pharmacology. The Aztecs, under the strict guidance of their priests, utilized powerful psychoactive plants and fungi, which they revered not as drugs of abuse but as sacred keys to the spirit world. These substances, known as entheogens, meaning generating the divine within, were considered portals for direct communication with the gods, a secret technology of consciousness used to gain visions, diagnose illness, and divine the future. The most revered of these sacred portals was a small, unassuming mushroom known to the Aztecs as Tionanacatl, which translates hauntingly to flesh of the gods. The Franciscan friar Bernardino de Sahagun, in the Florentine Codex, recorded the use of these mushrooms in ceremonies presided over by revered shamans he called wise men. He described how these small, black fungi were consumed with honey at a feast, after which participants would experience powerful visions. Some would weep, others would laugh, and some would see omens foretelling their future fortunes or the outcomes of battles. These were not recreational experiences, they were solemn religious rites. The mushrooms were believed to allow the consumer's soul to temporarily leave their body and travel to the realms of the deities, where they could receive messages and wisdom impossible to access in a normal state of consciousness. The shaman, acting as a spiritual guide, would interpret these visions for the community, transforming a personal psychedelic journey into a source of collective prophecy and healing. Another crucial entheogen was the seeds of the morning glory plant, which the Aztecs called Ololuqui, meaning round thing. The seeds of the Turbina corymbosa vine contain a potent alkaloid similar to LSD. In the Codices, we see depictions of the vine itself, and historical accounts describe how the seeds were ground into a powder and consumed in a ritual beverage. The effects were profound, inducing a trance-like state that priests used for divination. When a critical decision faced the community, where to move a village, when to plant crops, or whether to go to war, a priest would ingest Ololuqui to seek counsel from the gods directly. The visions received were not taken as simple hallucinations but as objective truths, divine intelligence that would directly guide the actions of rulers and citizens alike. The use was highly controlled, reserved for specific religious contexts, and administered only by trained specialists who understood the powerful forces they were engaging. The true secret of this practice lies in the Aztec understanding of the purpose behind these altered states. This was not about escapism or hedonistic pleasure. The goal was always pragmatic and spiritual, to access a hidden layer of reality where the gods resided and the patterns of fate were visible. A shaman might use a substance like peyote, the peyote cactus, to embark on a vision quest to locate lost objects or identify the spiritual cause of an illness. The altered state was a tool for problem solving, a means of tapping into a universal consciousness to retrieve information vital for the survival and well-being of the individual and the state. The experience was often challenging, involving terrifying visions and physical purging, which were seen as necessary trials to be endured to gain precious wisdom. The Aztecs viewed these plants with immense respect and fear, acknowledging their power to open the mind to both celestial beauty and underworldly terror. What makes this ancient practice so remarkable from a modern perspective is how it prefigures contemporary scientific interest in psychedelics. Today, researchers are studying psilocybin, the active compound in Tenochtitlan, for its potential to treat depression, anxiety, and addiction, often noting that subjects report profound, mystical-type experiences that bring about lasting positive changes in perspective. The Aztecs, operating within a completely different framework, had already discovered this therapeutic and transcendental potential. They had developed a sophisticated set of rituals, what we might now call set and setting, to guide these powerful experiences towards spiritual and communal benefit. Their secret was not just the identification of these psychoactive plants, but the creation of a sacred container for their use, recognizing that the mind, when properly guided, could become a direct conduit to the divine, offering insights that shaped the destiny of their entire civilization. In the intricate social tapestry of the Aztec world, your identity was not whispered, it was proclaimed by the very clothes on your back. Moving beyond the realms of sacred plants and cosmic journeys, we uncover a secret language woven into the fiber of everyday life, a silent yet eloquent code preserved in the detailed illustrations of the Codices. For the Aztecs, fashion was far more than personal adornment or protection from the elements. It was a precise and regulated visual vocabulary. A single glance at an individual's attire, headdress, or jewelry could instantly reveal their exact place in the social hierarchy, their professional trade, and even their heroic deeds on the battlefield. The Codices, acting as meticulous social registries, show us that in a society without mass media or identity cards, clothing was the primary medium for broadcasting who you were and what you had achieved. The foundation of this sartorial language was a strict system of sumptuary laws, rigid rules decreed by the state that dictated what materials, colors, and styles could be worn by each social class. These laws were the secret mechanism for maintaining order and preventing the blurring of social boundaries. Imagine a society where a common farmer could not, by law, wear cotton. That privilege was reserved for the nobility, the pipiltin. The average citizen, the Mesoamerican, was required to wear clothing made from rougher fibers like Megi cactus or simple reeds. This was not a matter of economics alone, it was a deliberate act of social engineering. By restricting the use of fine, comfortable cotton to the elite, the laws made status instantly visible and tangibly enforced the class structure every single day. The vibrant red dye from the cochineal insect and the brilliant blue-green hue of turquoise were also carefully controlled. To see a man draped in a crimson cloak or adorned with turquoise jewelry was to know without question that you were in the presence of someone of immense importance, likely a high priest, a high-ranking warrior, or a member of the royal family. These color-coded distinctions ensured that respect was paid automatically and that social mobility, while possible, was always visually marked and approved by the state. For men, the most basic and telling garment was the loincloth or maxtlatl. While every man wore one, the differences were stark. A commoner's maxtlatl would be a simple, unadorned strip of plain cloth, knotted functionally at the waist. A nobleman's maxtlatl, however, was a work of art. It could be made of finely woven white cotton, often intricately embroidered with complex patterns or even decorated with precious feathers. It might be longer and more elaborately tied, signaling a life free from manual labor. Over this, a man would wear a cape or tilmatli, and here the distinctions became even more pronounced. The size, the material, and the design of the cape were all calibrated to status. A ruler's tilmatli was a magnificent spectacle, a large, rectangular cloak that could be draped in a specific manner to denote his authority. The Codex Mendoza is filled with depictions of emperors receiving tribute, each shown wearing a unique and elaborate cape that immediately identifies them as the supreme leader. For women, the standard attire was a blouse or huipul and a skirt or cuitul. Again, the quality of the fabric and the complexity of the decoration spoke volumes. A noblewoman's huipul would be made of the softest cotton, dyed in rich, legally restricted colors and woven with exquisite geometric or floral designs that might have taken months to complete. Her skirt would be full and finely made. Commoner women, while still taking pride in their appearance, worked with humbler materials, their garments designed for durability in daily tasks like grinding corn or weaving. The true secret in female attire, however, lay in their hair. Unmarried girls wore their hair loose, but a married woman would style her hair in a very specific way, often weaving it with brightly colored ribbons. This simple hairstyle was a public declaration of her marital status, a subtle but universally understood signal within the community. The most dramatic and personalized expressions of identity, however, were reserved for the battlefield. A warrior's costume was his resume, a living record of his courage. The codices show that Aztec warriors did not wear uniform armor. Instead, they wore suits that displayed their rank and accomplishments. A young man who had not yet taken a prisoner would wear a simple, padded cotton armor suit, but with each capture he earned the right to add specific ornaments. After taking his first prisoner, he could wear the tlahuistli, a distinctive jumpsuit-like garment, often in a specific color or pattern. The ultimate achievement was to become a member of an elite warrior society like the Jaguar or Eagle Knights. Their costumes were full-body transformations. A Jaguar Knight would wear the complete pelt of the animal, with the head serving as a helmet. An Eagle Knight would be adorned in a suit of carefully arranged brown and white feathers with a fearsome, open-beaked eagle head helmet. These were not disguises, they were powerful symbolic embodiments. By wearing the jaguar's skin, the warrior was invoking the animal's stealth and power as a lord of the night. Donning the eagle's feathers connected him to the sovereign of the sky, the creature closest to the sun god. Their regalia communicated not just their rank, but also the divine forces they channeled in combat. Jewelry and body modifications provided another layer of this secret language. Noblemen wore large, intricate labrets or lip plugs made of polished obsidian, jade, or even gold. The size and material of the plug corresponded to their status. Similarly, elaborate ear spools, often made of amber, turquoise mosaic, or gold, were signs of high birth. These were not merely decorative, they were permanent modifications that required dedication and pain to acquire, marking the wearer as a member of the elite for life. Even sandals or cacti were potent status symbols. While commoners often went barefoot, especially while working, nobility and esteemed warriors always wore sandals. The very act of being shod was a public statement that one did not engage in demeaning physical labor. This intricate language of fashion, from the fiber of a commoner's loincloth to the feathered headdress of an emperor, ensured that every interaction in the Aztec world began with a clear, unspoken understanding of social position. It was a world where identity was not hidden but worn with pride, a vibrant and constantly evolving text written in cloth, color, and feather, ensuring that everyone knew their place and the places of those around them. Beneath the towering pyramids and the clamor of the great market, the Aztecs held a secret so profound that it challenges our modern assumptions about how a massive city can coexist with nature. While empires across history have often collapsed under the weight of their own consumption, exhausting the land that fed them, the Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan thrived for centuries, supporting a population that may have reached 250,000 people. The secret to this staggering feat of sustainability was not a single technology, but a complete, integrated system of environmental wisdom, a philosophy of reciprocity with the natural world that was most brilliantly expressed in their Chinampa agriculture. These so-called floating gardens were not magical islands, but a masterpiece of ecological engineering that turned the shallow lake bed into the most productive farmland the world had ever seen. A model of sustainable urban living that holds powerful lessons for our own time. The genius of the Chinampas lay in their elegant simplicity and their deep understanding of natural cycles. To create one, farmers would first stake out a long, rectangular plot in the shallow water using a fence of wooden poles. They would then weave a sturdy wattle of reeds and branches between these stakes to form the walls of the garden. This enclosure was then filled layer by layer with a rich mixture of mud scooped from the bottom of the lake and decaying aquatic vegetation. This combination was the secret to the system's incredible fertility. The lake mud was rich in nutrients washed down from the surrounding mountains, while the rotting plants provided a continuous source of organic compost. Willow trees were planted along the edges of the plot, their roots quickly growing down to anchor the Chinampa securely to the lake bed, preventing it from being washed away. Far from floating, these gardens were actually long, raised beds surrounded by canals, creating a vibrant, aquatic landscape that functioned like a man-made wetland. This design created a self-sustaining loop of fertility that required no chemical fertilizers or complex irrigation. The canals between the Chinampas were not just waterways for transportation, they were the circulatory system of the entire operation. Water would seep slowly through the porous soil of the garden beds, hydrating the plant roots through capillary action from below. This sub-irrigation meant the plants received a constant, perfect supply of moisture without any of the water loss from evaporation that plagues surface watering. Crucially, the system was continuously renewed. As farmers navigated their canoes through the canals, they would regularly dredge up the nutrient-rich muck from the bottom and pile it back onto the Chinampa beds, replenishing the soil after each harvest. This constant recycling of organic matter meant the soil never became depleted. In fact, it grew richer with time, allowing for an almost unbelievable level of productivity. While European farmers of the same era were lucky to achieve 1 or 2 harvests a year, the Chinampas could be cultivated year-round, yielding up to 7 separate harvests annually for certain fast-growing crops. This agricultural abundance was the direct result of a sophisticated understanding of local ecosystems and seasonal cycles, knowledge that was carefully observed and passed down through generations. The Aztecs practiced a form of polyculture, growing multiple crops together in the same plot in a way that benefited all the plants. They would plant maize, which grows tall, next to beans, which would use the corn stalk as a natural trellis. At the base, they would grow squash, whose large leaves shaded the soil, suppressing weeds and helping to retain moisture. This Three Sisters method, common throughout the Americas, is a perfect example of agricultural symbiosis where each plant supports the others. Their agricultural calendar was meticulously synchronized with the movements of the stars and the seasonal rains. They knew precisely when to plant to avoid early frosts and when to harvest to maximize yield. This deep, place-based knowledge allowed them to work with their environment rather than against it, creating a resilient food system that could withstand climatic variations. The true secret of this system, and its most profound relevance for today, was its holistic integration into the urban environment. The Chinampas were not located far away in the countryside. They formed a vast green belt that extended right to the edges of Tenochtitlan's urban core. This meant that food was produced hyper-locally, eliminating the need for long-distance transport and its associated energy costs. The canals serving the Chinampas doubled as transportation routes, allowing farmers to paddle their fresh produce directly to the city's markets within hours of harvest. This created a closed-loop urban metabolism where waste was minimized and efficiency was maximized. The Chinampas also provided crucial ecosystem services for the city. They acted as natural water filters, cleansing the lake water, and they created habitats for fish and waterfowl, adding another layer of food production to the system. They even helped to moderate the city's climate. In essence, Tenochtitlan was not a city that simply extracted resources from its hinterland. It was an urban organism that lived in a symbiotic relationship with its immediate environment. Presenting this ancient model today feels less like a history lesson and more like a vision of a possible future. In an era of industrial agriculture, monocropping, and sprawling supply chains that contribute significantly to climate change, the Chinampa system stands as a testament to a different way of living. It demonstrates that high productivity does not have to come at the expense of soil health or biodiversity. It shows how cities can be designed to produce their own food sustainably, reducing their ecological footprint while enhancing the well-being of their citizens. Modern urban farmers and planners are now looking back to these ancient techniques for inspiration, experimenting with raised bed agriculture, aquaponics, and integrated water management that echo the principles the Aztecs mastered centuries ago. The secret wisdom of the Chinampas is a powerful reminder that some of the most advanced solutions to our contemporary environmental challenges may not lie in new technology, but in rediscovering the timeless ecological intelligence of the past. Yet after the empire fell and the great temples were reduced to rubble, the story of the Codices was far from over. Their very existence today is the ultimate secret, a testament to one of history's most remarkable acts of cultural preservation. In the devastating aftermath of the conquest, when the systematic destruction of indigenous knowledge seemed absolute, a quiet, courageous resistance began. Indigenous scribes and nobles, recognizing that their world was being erased, made a fateful decision. They would not let their history die. Using the materials and, crucially, the legal systems introduced by the Spanish, they began to create new codices. These post-conquest documents are unique hybrids, fascinating blends of Aztec and European traditions. They were often painted on European paper, bound as books rather than long strips, and sometimes included annotations in Spanish or Latin. But at their heart, they remained profoundly indigenous. The scribes used the ancient pictographic system to record ancestral land claims, royal genealogies, and histories of their people, presenting these documents in Spanish courts to defend their rights and property. In doing so, they used the conqueror's own tools to secretly safeguard the memory of the world they had lost, ensuring that the voice of their civilization would not be silenced. The journey of these precious books through the centuries is a saga of narrow escapes and forgotten libraries. Some, like the Codex Borgia, had already been hidden away in remote regions before the conquest and thus avoided the bonfires entirely. Others were smuggled out of Mexico by Spanish officials who, perhaps driven by curiosity or a collector's instinct, sent them back to Europe as exotic curiosities. There they gathered dust in the private libraries of nobles and monasteries, their meaning completely lost to their new owners. For generations, they were mislabeled as Egyptian artifacts or simple pagan picture books. It was not until the 19th century, as antiquarian interest in the Americas grew, that scholars began to recognize them for what they were, the sole surviving libraries of a great civilization. They were given the names we know them by today: Mendoza, Borgia, Vaticanus, often based on the European collectors or institutions that had unknowingly become their guardians for centuries. Their survival is a series of miracles, a chain of chance events that saved them from decay, ignorance, and war, allowing them to wait patiently for a time when the world would be ready to understand them. That time is now, and the process of decoding these books is accelerating in ways the original scribes could never have imagined. Modern technology is acting as a kind of intellectual time machine, allowing scholars to see these documents in a completely new light. One of the most powerful tools is infrared reflectography. When a codex page is scanned with infrared light, it can penetrate the uppermost layers of paint to reveal earlier sketches, corrections, and even completely hidden glyphs that have been obscured by time or later additions. It's as if we are being given the chance to look over the shoulder of the original artist, to see their first drafts and their changes. In some cases, infrared imaging has revealed that a Spanish gloss written in the margin centuries ago was actually a misinterpretation of a now visible underlying glyph, correcting a historical mistake that has stood for hundreds of years. Similarly, advanced spectroscopic analysis can identify the exact mineral composition of the pigments, tracing the lapis lazuli for blue or the cinnabar for red back to their specific mines, which in turn reveals ancient trade routes that were previously unknown. This technological renaissance is transforming our understanding page by page. What was once considered a simple illustration is now revealed to be a palimpsest of meaning, with layers of information painted over each other. A seemingly blank section of amate paper might, under ultraviolet light, glow with the faint outline of a forgotten map. A dark patch of discoloration on a deerskin page might be identified as a specific type of organic ink, giving clues to the ceremonial context in which the codex was used. Every new scan, every chemical analysis is like tuning a radio to a clearer frequency, allowing the static of centuries to fall away and the original message to come through with stunning clarity. The codices are not static relics, they are active participants in a conversation that is still unfolding. Each technological breakthrough poses new questions even as it answers old ones, proving that these books are far more complex than we ever suspected. The legacy of the codices, therefore, is not locked in the past. It is a living, evolving dialogue between the ancient scribes and the modern scholars who strive to hear them. The greatest secret they hold may be the very nature of knowledge itself, that it is resilient, adaptable, and capable of surviving even the most determined attempts to destroy it. The indigenous artists who painted these books under colonial rule ensured that their history would have a witness. Today, a new generation of researchers, many of them of indigenous descent themselves, are leading the charge to reinterpret these documents, bringing their own cultural insights to the glyphs and challenging centuries-old colonial interpretations. They are not just studying the codices, they are reconnecting with them, reclaiming a heritage that was nearly lost. The story of the Aztec codices is a powerful reminder that history is written by the survivors, and in this case, the survivors were not just people, but the beautiful, cryptic, and enduring books that hold the soul of a civilization. They continue to speak, and we are only just beginning to understand the full depth of what they have to say. And so our journey through the 30 secrets of the Aztec Codices comes to a close, not as an end, but as a new beginning in our understanding. We began with a world in flames, a civilization seemingly erased by conquest and dogma. But as we have seen, the story did not end in the ashes of Tenochtitlan. It was merely encrypted, waiting for curious minds to learn its visual language. What these ancient books reveal is a civilization of breathtaking complexity and profound contradiction, one that defies the simplistic caricature of bloodthirsty warriors that has persisted for centuries. The Aztecs were indeed fierce, but they were also astronomers who mapped the cycles of Venus with precision, engineers who built a metropolis on a lake, and philosophers who pondered the nature of truth and the balance of the human soul. They were a people who composed poetry about the fragility of life while building an empire through disciplined warfare, who saw the entire cosmos as a delicate dance of creative and destructive energies that required their conscious participation. This is the true legacy of the Codices. They force us to hold multiple truths at once, to see the grandeur and the terror not as opposites, but as intertwined threads in a single, magnificent tapestry. The real tragedy, then, is not just the physical destruction wrought by the conquest, but the intellectual and cultural silencing that followed. For every codex that survives, like the Mendoza or the Borgia, thousands of others were fed to the flames, each one a unique library containing lost histories, forgotten medicinal recipes, and silenced songs. The knowledge of the Comicac schools, the intricate details of the Tonalpohualli divinations, the specific techniques of the master goldsmiths, so much has been irrevocably lost. The surviving books are therefore more than historical artifacts. They are precious, fragmentary whispers from a universe of thought that we can only partially reconstruct. They are a permanent reminder of the fragility of human knowledge and the catastrophic cost of cultural intolerance. Their continued study is an act of restitution, a way of honoring the scribes, artists, and thinkers who risked everything to ensure their world would not be entirely forgotten, encoding their secrets in deerskin and amate paper as a message to the future. That future is now, and the conversation is far from over. With every new technological advance, from infrared imaging to spectroscopic analysis, we peel back another layer of meaning from these resilient pages. Each discovery adds a new piece to the puzzle, challenging our assumptions and deepening our appreciation for this fascinating civilization. The story of the Aztecs is still being written, and you are now a part of it. Having ventured through these 30 secrets, from the cosmic drama of the five suns to the sustainable genius of the Chinampas, we turn the question over to you. Which of these hidden truths resonated most deeply? Was it the philosophical depth of in Ixtli, in Yolotl, the face and the heart, the engineering marvel of the aqueducts and dikes? Or perhaps the tragic irony of the Quetzalcoatl prophecy that so clouded Moctezuma's judgment? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear which secret unlocked a new perspective for you. If you enjoyed this journey into the heart of a lost codex, be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. There are countless more historical mysteries waiting to be unraveled, and we look forward to exploring them with you next